People that would have been considered schizophrenic and crazy 20 years ago are completely correct today.
What are the most vulnerable areas for data collection or surveillance that the average person might not even realize could be leveraged against them?
I would say just about everything. When you say everything is spying on you at this point, that's technically true. That turned into a conversation on ownership, which is just how many modern companies are just revoking the idea that you own what you bought and paid for. Everything is a subscription. When the company stops supporting it, the product doesn't work anymore. Buy a new one. This is a fun one. So AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon all got in trouble a few years ago for collecting people's data, location data, and then selling it. They sold it to bounty hunters, bail bondsmen, bail bonds.
Really?
This goes so far beyond any sort of Fourth Amendment thing. They were fined something like $44 to $57 million. And this is a year they made billions. Just because something is a law does not mean that it's going to be immediately followed or that you're not going to get in trouble if you break it.
There's clearly something else going on here. The bigger corporations have the ability to get so much more intimate information about how to serve you, but I would argue also manipulate. It's really your behavior that is the product, right? Your watch time on video, watch time on platform. And when your behavior is the product, not you, that behavior is at risk of manipulation. My guest today is Louis Rossmann. If you've ever bought a piece of technology only to realize the manufacturer still holds the keys, you already know why this conversation matters. Louis is the absolute tip of the spear in the right to repair movement. He started out doing component-level logic board repairs on MacBooks that the manufacturers swore were dead, and he turned that expertise into millions of subscribers on YouTube in a full-blown legislative crusade. He's testified before state legislators, gone toe-to-toe with giants like Apple and John Deere, and recently co-founded the FULU Foundation to fight for your digital ownership rights. Whether he's exposing the rot in influencer culture, tearing apart corporate end-user license agreements that steal what you purchased, or breaking down why you don't actually own your devices, Louis does not pull punches. He's out there fighting to ensure when you buy something, you actually own it. Now, before we get into it, a quick note on how this show operates. Louis fights against corporate monopolies controlling your hardware, and on this show, I'm fighting against tech monopolies controlling our reach. That's why you're not going to hear any sponsor reads or ad breaks today. This podcast is 100% independent. For over 2 decades, I've faced demonetization and throttling of my views based on the content I create. I refuse to play their game, which is why relying on these platforms to reach you is a dead end. If you enjoy this content, the only thing that I ask is you contribute constructively to the conversation down below and head over to warriorsgarden.com and sign up for my email list. It's the only way I know I can communicate with the people who value what I have to say directly and completely free from the algorithms. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Louis. Louis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. It's wild. I like cold emailed you here, and now you're here. This is awesome. So for, I guess, my viewers here that may not be familiar with you and everything, how I came about your channel was actually, I live on a farm, and I saw you did a video on John Deere. I'm like, yes, finally somebody's talking about this. But then you popped back up in my feed around the Austin City Council thing. So just a little bit of context for viewers and everything, kind of what's your background as far as technology is concerned and your businesses and stuff like that?
Sure. I became a repairman. I started a repair shop by accident since I needed a laptop that ran Logic, so I needed to finish this recording studio session. And the recording studio I worked at in 2008 went out of business, and I was broke, so I bought one on eBay. And the one I bought on eBay didn't work, and when I got a partial refund. When I fixed it and I finished that session and I sold it, I made $200 or $300, and I just thought, $300 for 20 minutes of work, that's not bad. There's a recession, everybody lost their job. So I just kind of accidentally found myself into repairing Apple products. And the last 15 years or so on YouTube has just been me unraveling the thread as I try to figure out, why is it so difficult to do this? Like, why can't I just buy parts the way that a plumber goes to a plumbing supply store and buys pipes and everything that they need? Why is it for modern products that the entire supply chain looks like the Nicolas Cage movie Lord of War, where it's, like city bribing officials and sneaking guns and everything out of countries? And there was this article in The Information in 2017 or 2018 where they were talking about these underground tunnels that were being built in Apple factories or Foxconn and Quanta, where employees were sneaking out recycled things. And
Really?
That's when it hit me. It's the entire process to do what I do is built on Nicolas Cage, Lord of War. And it's just, and I just kept kind of pulling that thread. And as I pulled that thread, it came into right to repair. What does it mean to have right to repair or not have right to repair or be able to fix what you bought and paid for? That turned into a conversation on ownership, which is just how many modern companies are just trying to forget about revoking repair, just revoking the idea that you own what you bought and paid for. Everything is a subscription. When the company stops supporting it, the product doesn't work anymore. Buy a new one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. So that was right around the 2008 era, right?
Right, yeah, 2008 is when I started, and 2012 is when I started YouTube.
Honestly, that's right around when I got going in software development and everything. Was building out Hackintosh computers and everything like that, and just constantly kernel panic. It was just an absolute dumpster fire and everything. And now you have a business where you repair stuff. Is it personal computers? Is it all technology? What is your business?
It was an Apple technology repair business that went over component level repair. So instead of replacing a $1,500 board, we would try to fix it by replacing the 50-cent component that went bad. And as that has become less viable because it's harder to find parts, we've mostly become a data recovery business now. So hard drives, SSDs, stuff, anything like that. It's kind of like what Drive Savers and All On Track would do, but without the excessive pricing that comes from their advertising and affiliate network.
Yeah, I feel like that just immediately elicits an emotional response to me, because a few years ago I had an issue where I had a hard drive failure or something along those lines, and I started looking for businesses that could potentially recover the data. And it seemed like a lot of those businesses were scams. Like they would get a kickback to send your drive off to this other company. I forget the name of it. Are you familiar with that?
Drive Savers does a lot of this, where if they have secure data, there's a bunch of companies where they have these affiliate programs.
Yes.
And you get paid to refer them work. And what they do is they claim, well, we have this gigantic clean room that's cost $2 million. You need this to open a hard drive, and that's why you're paying us $5,000 to $9,000 for recovery. When in reality, what you're paying for is the affiliate marketing commissions. And also, a lot of these companies use Google AdWords. And I'm not going to say Google AdWords is unethical, but when I looked into what it would cost for myself to do it, it was $150 to $167 per click. So let's say that you get 20% of your customers. That means that you're paying $900 to $1,000 just to get somebody in the door paying. So if somebody has shown up and to get that person in your door, you paid $900, you're not going to tell them that it was just lint in their charge port when that's the only problem that's key. You're going to charge them $2,000 or $3,000 for data recovery. And it's very predatory, in my opinion, because you're doing this to people who don't know any better. And companies that do that was kind of, that treated consumers like that was a big part of what excited me to do what I do. Be honest with you, I'm not excited about being a repair person. There's this misconception that I love repair. I like solving puzzles I like helping people that wouldn't have been helped, and I like kicking bullies in the shins. And the great part about the niche that I occupied is I got to do all three at once. So I don't enjoy running jumper wires to 96 little 2.5 millimeter balls under a chip to make it work again. I enjoy when somebody tells me, those were the pictures of my late husband that I would have lost. Thank you so much. And they give us a hug. And the Apple store said nobody can do it. And Drive Savers wanted 10K or something. And we say we can do it for a few $100s. That's what makes it fun for me. I like solving real problems. And even when it comes to issues of mass surveillance, the story is what makes it fun for me. It's not just a camera was put up. That's boring. A camera was put up that has AI that can watch you. More interesting. A camera was put up that has AI that can watch you, but the entire city council said they didn't want it. How did it get put through? Oh, you have to ask the city council for anything over $500,000. And the mayor said, we're going to make the contract $498,000.
Yeah.
Then there's a story, and that's what gets me excited about it. And I try to share that story with the people that watch my channel to find ways to get people interested in these things.
I love it. Charlie Munger has one of my favorite quotes. Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And both of those examples, it's hard, again, not to get emotional when you talk about somebody who's potentially losing the photos of the loved one. Or, let's be honest, most of their life is recorded on their phone now and everything, and sometimes backed up to their laptops and stuff. And whenever I started going down the rabbit hole of repair shops in the greater Austin area and everything, and they were like, oh, it's going to be $2,000-$3,000 and there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to recover anything. And I just refused to accept that, and finally found a place, like you said, that was able to just put a new battery in and you know, it was like $100 and everything was recovered. I'm like, oh, I get it now. The incentive was for them to ship it off, to charge me the $2,000 so that they could get the $400 kickback instead of the $100 thing just to replace the battery. It totally makes sense now. And it's interesting you bring that up about the city and everything, because I feel like as a, you know, the right to repair and everything, now you're shifting into the world of surveillance. And while I'm doing research on this new book that I'm looking to write, that really like piqued my curiosity, because the whole flock infrastructure and like being able to use third-party cameras, not just their own proprietary stuff and everything, is just, I feel like it's such a ball of yarn that once you start pulling on it and everything, you realize like, oh man, there's way more to this story than I can really like individually like just unravel. So how did that come about for you? Because if you know, Flock, like I know you went to Austin City Council and everything else. Like, when did this get on your radar? When did this become a concern for you?
I go to these monthly EFF Austin meetups, and there's this one woman.
What's EFF?
Electronic Frontier Foundation. So they do a lot of the work to try and push back against this type of stuff, like age verification for using a computer, all these types of laws that get proposed every few years that would ruin the internet or personal computing. They're always pushing back against. And there's a separate organization called EFF Austin that's local to the city of Austin, and they have meetups every month. And this one girl was telling me about, her name is Mackenzie Ryan. She's a lawyer that works at the, I think, Wikimedia Foundation. And she was saying automated license plate readers are a problem. And I didn't listen to her because I just thought that sounds boring. Automated license plate reader, yawn. So I get on 45 East and it reads my license plate. That's what I think of. That's what it invokes.
Yeah.
And the name itself is such a bad name because it doesn't actually explain what it does. And what an automated license plate reader does is it reads the license plate in the car, but Flock ALPRs say on the site that they can fingerprint your car even if you take the license plate off. So it's not. It can profile the car perfectly based on any of the markings on it. And it's an AI powered.
So dense, any of that kind of.
Yeah. Now, what got this on my radar in Austin was not that company. It was a company called LiveView Technologies. There was a bunch of people emailed in saying they don't want this. It was put on the agenda, and a bunch of people showed up in front of City Hall to protest against these showing up. And then 1 month later, they show up on the agenda anyway. But it wasn't an item that you could speak to unless you already knew that it was going to be on the agenda. And it was a very, I don't remember the exact detail of it, but I do remember that the people from the company were able to speak, but people who lived there locally were not able to sign up. The only way that you were able to sign up is if you knew that they were going to be invited back ahead of time. So I arranged a bunch of people to show up, and they said, well, I guess we can't speak against the cameras. So I told everybody, no, well, the cameras were going to be item 33, right? They said to expect them back on the agenda. No, now I remember what it is. Okay, they said we will allow you. What did they say? They said that if this comes back on the agenda as an item you can speak to, we will let you know.
And they didn't notify
members from the company signed up to speak in the public comment section, which would allow them to speak even if it wasn't on the agenda. But nobody there was allowed to speak because it wasn't on the agenda. So essentially, people from the company would be able to give their sales pitch to the city, but the residents would not be able to speak on it. In August, it was supposed to be item 33. It was removed from the agenda last minute. So a bunch of people showed up to protest because they wanted to be able to say, they all took off from work to show up and say, we don't want these cameras there. Now, they said, we expect to bring it back next month. Next month shows up, and it's not brought up as an item that you could speak on. But in the public comments, 2 salespeople for the company had signed up to speak. So everybody said, well, wait, what does this mean? Does this mean that I can't voice my opposition? And I said, no, feel free to sign up and speak on item 33. And they said, well, item 33 is about a VPN. What are we going to do? And I'm like, tie whatever item you sign up to speak to this, to show the city council that you're not going to play this stupid game.
Yeah, and I think the mayor, I saw that video, he was just kept calling everyone out of order, and I'm like,
yeah, so talk as long as you can, waste the 2 minutes of time, and keep doing this. And like, show them, you need to teach them a lesson that this is not how you communicate with your citizens. And the reason I did that is because every single time this has occurred, in other cities and other states, it gets snuck in through some weird underhanded way. One example is in the city of Cleveland. In Cleveland, Ohio, there was a person who worked in the city council, and he quit to go work for Flock. Right after he quit to go work for Flock, it was pushed through as an emergency ordinance. Now, if you look into the city and state statute, it says that you can't quit your job working for city council and then go to work for a company where you're discussing or working on the very items you were legislating. But there's an exemption, and the exemption to that ethics rule is if it's pushed through as an emergency ordinance. Boom. That's exactly why this happens as an emergency ordinance in all these different places across the country, because you'll always see it gets pushed through as an emergency for public safety. When you push it through as an emergency, that little loophole that says that you can't just hire the city council person and then figure out how to use that inside knowledge to get it pushed through goes away. In Moreno Valley in California, Flock hired the mayor of the city while he was still the mayor.
Really?
Yes. And the funny thing is, the mayor actually he sued them because he was let go. He claimed he was let go because he wouldn't use his inside connections to try and get Flock cameras installed in the city. And I think this is funny on both sides. I mean, on Flock's side, for trying to just hire members of the city council or hire the mayor and try to get the cameras installed that way. From the mayor's side, like, did you think that they were hiring you because of your charming looks? I mean, why do you think that they were hiring you while you were still the mayor, when they wanted to get cameras installed in that city?
That is wild.
And it happens in plain sight. In Denver, what made the story funny is you're not allowed to have a contract done without approval of city council unless it's under $500,000. So the mayor rewrote the contract with Flock and asked for a contract for like $498,000 or $499,000 to get around the city council. It always happens in this type of weird way, and it's a pattern across the country when you see how the installs are done. So when I saw that LiveView wanted this done in Austin, and well, they're kicking the can down the road. You can talk about it next month, and the next month, well, actually, no, we're not going to have it on the agenda. But the people from the company are coming to speak. I didn't want to risk it.
Yeah.
I wanted to show the city that we're not risking having the same thing happen here that happened in every other city. And if this was something that everybody wanted, in my opinion, you wouldn't have to do it in the shady, underhanded way. You wouldn't have to hire a city council person to give you advice on how to push things through as an emergency. You wouldn't have to hire the mayor while he's still the mayor. Like, why are you hiring the mayor while you're still the mayor when you're contracting with the city? What are you doing?
Yeah, it's clearly an incentive-based kind of corrupt process. But maybe I'll play the devil's advocate here, because what I'm really concerned about is the average person who is complacent in this kind of situation where they're just going about life. I have nothing to hide. Why should I care? How does that impact me if they're, logging my license plate as I'm driving down the road, or what's the potential downstream consequences of that?
I think the hardest thing before I even got into the surveillance stuff is getting somebody to care about a problem when it doesn't personally affect them. Because every time somebody would come into my store, after I was done working on the device, I would tell them, just so you know, all these pictures I got back, or the thing that I fixed for 200 that they wanted 2,000 for, the only reason I was able to fix this is because I was able to get access to this part in this way, and I may not be able to do that next year. And I would try to get people into right to repair that way. And there are a lot of activists that would just yell in people's ear, here's why you should care about this. And that's why a lot of activism now, I think, has a bad name. What I try to do is I try to get people to care about something based on having positive personal experience with it. With surveillance, that's a difficult thing because, again, it's when you break something and I can fix it, that's much easier for me to give you that kick of dopamine on repair than it is something like this. Here, you have to have that chill go down your spine moment.
Yeah.
For me, one of those moments was when I was going through Google Takeout. Google has this little microphone in their keyboard since 2010, so you could do voice to text. I don't know where they click wrapped me or how they got me to agree to this, but I remember logging into this in 2019 or 2020 and seeing every single argument or discussion that I had, including the original voice recording, in my account.
No way.
That freaked me out. So with this...
And what was this from?
This is just using the Android keyboard and the voice-to-text functionality. Things that I had said 10 and 11 years ago were transcribed, kept, the voice recordings were all still there, and it's like, that's a lot of data retention if my account got hacked or anything else. And you just kind of left this all there, and I had no idea.
Where was this buried?
If you use Google Takeout, you can export all the data that Google has on you, and you can see every single, or at least the data that they say that they have on you. And I found that very strange. And that was when I started waking up to the idea that I should probably have less of a digital footprint. Now, with all of this stuff and normal people not caring, it's difficult to get people to understand why they should care about this at first, because it's not immediately affecting them. Having a log of everywhere that you go. Now, when it starts there was one woman in Colorado, I believe, Colorado or Florida. She was driving through a town, and after she drove through the town, an officer knocked on her door and said that you stole a package from somebody's porch. Now, her dash cam video showed that she never stopped the entire time she was in the town. And immediately, I'm not saying that rich people don't steal. It's just she was driving some $70,000 or $90,000 Rivian, and we're talking about a $7 Amazon package. It was like a 50 or 60-year-old lady. It just didn't fit the profile of somebody that's gonna like stop and steal a $7 package. And the cop said, he said, and I quote, "You can't get a breath of fresh air in this town without us knowing," which should be creepy. Now, she asked, "Can I see the evidence you have against me?" And he said, "I don't have to show this to you. I don't have to show this to you." And I think showing that type of footage to somebody would let them know just how creepy and weird this is. You're getting into this Minority Report where the AI camera says that you're guilty, and the cops just accept that the AI camera said you're guilty, so you must be guilty. So you are? That's insane. And he tried to write her a citation for this.
And this was a combination of what, like flock style cameras
Flock
or
cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was flock cameras, and he said, "You can't get a breath of fresh air in this town without us knowing." That is creepy. So playing something like that and thinking this could happen to you. Now, again, for most people, they're not going to care until it actually happens to them. And that's been the difficult point for me, is I've been trying to get people to become activists here one point at a time, like one broken item that works, one $2,000 bill that we turned into a $200 bill. One, I thought I lost all my information. Never mind, here's it all back. But it's not efficient to do that one at a time.
Yeah. I've kind of been trying to go down this rabbit hole because I feel like, how do you make this as much an emotional, intimate, just creepy like situation for people where you just remove the veil? And again, surveillance is such a broad category. You have everything from your IoT devices around your house, home surveillance, public surveillance, your vehicles, your wearables. I mean, there's so many different categories. Is there anything that you feel like is just like is the flock camera kind of like the thing you're focused on right now, or is there other things like your dishwasher at home and just your Apple Watch? Like, what are the most vulnerable areas for data collection or surveillance that the average person might not even realize could be leveraged against them?
I would say just about everything. No, when you say everything is spying on you at this point, that's technically true. Like, people that would have been considered schizophrenic and crazy 20 years ago are completely correct today. It's weird because I remember Alex Jones saying in 2001 that your television is spying on you for the government. And in 2001, that was legitimately insane. And in 2023, when you turn on an LG G3 OLED, the most expensive TV they have, the first thing you go through when you go through settings, do not sell my personal information. And the option is
27 clicks.
Off. It's off, but like it's off by default. Yeah. So that's okay, he was crazy then, but that idea, the thing he said, is not crazy now. It's literally in my menu. So it's difficult for me to even say where to start because it's everywhere. So one example you gave is your car. And a lot of people, one of the other things that's the most difficult with this type of activism is getting people to stop fighting amongst themselves and actually look at the people who are screwing them. So one instance, people will say, "Oh, you drive a Tesla, you're a dumbass. I can't believe you bought a car with a computer in it, you moron. That's why you're getting spied on." What they don't realize is that General Motors has been doing the spying since 2015. So General Motors has been doing something where they collect all the data on your driving since 2015. They take that data and they sell it to LexisNexis, a data broker. LexisNexis then sells it to insurance companies. There was something that front page of the New York Times, and where somebody had a Chevy Bolt car, they accelerated fast, and then their insurance rates went up. Geico knew that they had fast acceleration. Geico knew the way they were driving because General Motors was selling that data to them. And the Attorney General in the state of Texas actually sued General Motors over this a year and a half ago, and they're demanding billions of dollars for it. So it's easy to laugh at somebody who bought like a modern electric car and say, "You're a dumbass, you want modern tech." What they don't realize is that all these legacy automakers are starting to do the same thing. And it's easy to use more modern automakers as the piñata or as the Trojan horse to pretend it's all on them or pretend it's all on the EVs, when older style cars are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's a massive can of worms, the automotive industry. Yeah, so I would be curious to know how much, if because they're publicly traded companies, how much money they're making subsidizing the cost of a vehicle through selling that consumer data, as you say, like to LexisNexis and some of these other companies, even to the point of agreeing to the click wrap on connecting your smartphone and storing the text messages on the vehicle, all these different things. Like, again, being in the world of right to repair, how do you mitigate this stuff?
I almost forgot about that one. There's somebody that I'm going to come up with just as you talk. So about storing the text messages in the vehicle, that's a separate one. So in Washington, they have a privacy law. And the way that now when you connect your car and you say allow access to text messages, you're not just allowing the car access to the text messages temporarily, it stores them. Do you know how to delete those from your car?
Rip the computer out. Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
You have to destroy the computer in the car.
Yeah.
There's no way for you as the user to destroy that data in the car. It's impossible. So to get the text messages out, you have to have special software. Now, there is special software that can retrieve that data, which is why you would want to destroy it. In Washington, they have a privacy law, and many consumers sued the automakers. They sued Honda, Ford, etc., and they wanted damages. And according to the privacy law, in this case, the way it's written, it says that you have to actually prove that your reputation was harmed in some way or that you lost money. That's the only way that you can prove damages. So they can take the text messages from your car. It's kind of like blackmail. Imagine if I was filming everything that you said, but it's not illegal unless I use it against you. It's not illegal unless I publish something where I say, look, he's lying. He's actually for gun control. Look, he's been lobbying for gun control this whole time. If I release that, then it's a crime. But until I release the information that's blackmail on you, until I actually start releasing it publicly, it's not a crime. Yeah. I think that's insane. If I'm watching you and I'm stealing data on you, that without consent, that in and of itself should be a fucking crime. If I'm spying outside of your house and recording you, that's stalking, right?
Yeah.
But when they do it, it's not unless they've done something that harms your reputation. So the automakers won in that instance.
Well, so again, here I'm like, the struggle is, I want people to care. I want people to care about privacy and their digital footprint and all these other different things. But I also want to give proactive solutions like that they can, even if it's small, things that they can do to mitigate or offset that. Like, what do you do in that instance? Like, I guess they're called the TCU and Fords, the telematics control unit. Do you just disconnect those? Do you disconnect if there's a SIM card, do you remove it, damage your antenna or something like that so that it doesn't transmit? Well, like, what does a consumer do at that point?
I would start with the small things that you can do because you're not going to be able to do everything at once. It's impossible. It's overwhelming. And once people get overwhelmed with it, they go, I give up. I accept it as it is. What if you just did not, when you pair the Bluetooth to your car, what if you just say, don't allow contacts and text messages? Well, then that means you can't use the voice to text, which means you have to wait until you're done driving to text message somebody.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. I mean, I've gone through the painful process of trying to, again, like, I guess in my first book, one of the lessons that I really learned is that friction in the human experience is a good thing. Be it lifting weights, one of the easiest analogies that I give a lot of people that, again, is very sensational, but it creates that emotional response is pornography, where in a human relationship, you typically have to go through the process of shots on goal. You go to a bar, you risk being rejected, asking people out. You ultimately get to go to, you find somebody who wants to go on a date, and you go out on a date, and then maybe at some point in time you find somebody who's compatible. One thing leads to another, and then ultimately you have sex, and then you reach climax or whatever, and then there's all this effort that goes up to that point, right? But then you can circumvent that entire process and get straight to the oxytocin dopaminergic release by just going straight to pornography or whatever, right? And you're skipping all of the friction. It's not to pass judgment in any way, shape, or form on people and what they do in their private life. It's just to say that there are two instances to reach the same end conclusion. One requires a lot of friction. That friction ultimately reinforces a relationship between people or whatever. And you can say that in so many different things, like the dopamine and scrolling and all the different systems that the neurobiological processes that you're circumventing or hijacking in that instance. And I'm trying to meaningfully introduce friction in my life in a way that, like, buying DVDs instead of streaming and stuff like that. Do I really care enough about this movie or this TV show that I'm willing to wait 2 days to buy the DVD box set and then put it into the DVD player and then watch it? If no, then does it really justify my time and whatever that is? And so I went down the rabbit hole of, okay, maybe I don't want to pair devices to my vehicle. Maybe I'll get a dedicated USB jump drive, because you can buy music from Amazon Music, DRM free. You download it and you put it on a jump drive. Most vehicles now have USB ports. You can just put that on, have your music accessible while you're driving. The unfortunate thing is it's because it's not CarPlay or Android's version of CarPlay or Apple's. The functionality sucks. Like you can't scrub through artists or playlists and stuff like that while you're driving down the road. So I was like, all right, well, I'll get a dedicated MP3 player, and all of them suck at pairing. I bought like 20 of them because I was going to do like reviews on like what's the one, like on stupid cheap ones that are like, $10 to the more expensive $200-$300 ones that have like the really high quality files. Nothing. Like the phone pairs like so well with all the modern vehicles, and a lot of them now don't even have a 3.5 millimeter auxiliary port. It's all like USB and everything. So I'm trying to find these ways to, I don't know, maybe get a Garmin instead of a...
It's going to be almost impossible because fundamentally you're trying to do something that nobody else is trying to do. I got my girlfriend this MP3 player that has all of the stuff on it, and it doesn't... I noticed that when you pair it to a car, the Bluetooth quality is horrible, and I haven't figured out which codec it's using yet. I don't know if it's missing certain codecs or if it's what it is, but the reason that that's horrible is that nobody is trying to use an MP3 player. They're all trying to use a phone. And I wrote this 900-page guide in 2024. I thought it was going to take me, I really thought it was going to take me a few days to just go over how does the thermostat work in my house? What do I use as an alternative to Google Photos? What do I use as an alternative to their phone system? I wanted to make something that frees you from Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, everything. And just we're using open source software for everything. It took me 3 months.
Really?
I was like up at 2 a.m. and trying to finish this. And then like it was, I started in September and I didn't finish it until December. I barely produced any videos because I was just trying to write this guide and how to reproduce this. And the whole idea was to try and remove as much friction. And I'm just realizing the fact that it takes me 3 months to figure out how to remove friction from this process is just difficult because nobody is actually trying to do those things. And if you're trying to buy an MP3 player and 99.9999% of the world is not trying to do that, the people who are making that, there's probably almost no money in it, which means there's not a lot of people caring about whether or not it can be done well. If nobody's going to use the work, then there's not as much people who are going to try and get rid of all the bugs and everything in it. And I appreciate the idea of adding friction. I tried to go in the opposite direction, which is let me figure out if there's a way I can remove friction from the process so that people can use things that they actually own when they buy it. And the amount of work that I had to do to try and figure out how to remove friction was... and spend 3 months of my life taking off work.
So was that just a comprehensive all things in your life that you're trying to remove those technologically, like so that people have alternatives to?
Yeah, like an alternative to Google Photos, an alternative to Gmail, an alternative to using them like your Verizon for your phone system at work as a PBX, an alternative to pretty much everything, your home's camera system, an alternative to Nest thermostat. Like I wanted to write an entire guide on how to avoid all these things. Because I don't use a lot of those things in my personal life, but it took me 13 or 14 years of slowly replacing one thing with another and dealing with all the quirks and the stuff that doesn't work in the open source software to get that to happen.
You have a pretty big audience. Why don't you leverage them to help that process?
If you ask people to help you do something on the internet, they won't do it. If you do it wrong and you confidently say this is the right way to do it, then they will. So I wrote a guide telling people... I made it a wiki and I said, this is the right fucking way to do it. I've asked for help with this for a long time and I never got anywhere. And I'm like, here's the right way to do it. And then I post it and you have all these people going, that's incorrect, and correcting me. And they're like, thank you.
That's
like,
great.
You're a moron. You got something. Tell me more. Yeah, so
that's great.
It is actually a wiki. It's at wiki.fudo.org. It's a 900-page little manual on how to do all these things that has been corrected by a community of people even more autistic than me.
I love it. Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people are trying to be more intentional with technology. You see that digital minimalism kind of movement. Maybe it's Gen Alpha, and some of the younger ones. Like you see the kind of resurgence of the Apple iPod and stuff like that, the lookalikes and everything. People going back to wired headphones and everything. I don't know how much that is on mass or if it's just like the romanticism of nostalgia in some way, shape, or form. But again, like I put so much time and effort, and I still have no resolution as far as the MP3 player is concerned for the vehicle. I would love to download just a ton of music and just have it on shuffle and being able to connect on my truck as I drive and stuff. But like you say, it's just there's I guess no incentive on that. So selfishly, home surveillance, because you brought up Nest. something I've thought about a lot, and just kind of curious because I know a lot of people, as far as privacy is concerned, be it nanny cams, Nest cameras. Some people have them in their houses, which I think is absolutely absurd that you would have a Nest cam pointed in your house, tied to a Gmail account or something that you have probably exposed in thousands of data breaches throughout the span of your life. So what are the alternatives to maybe Nest cams and stuff like that? Is it Ubiquiti? Like, what are the brands out there that you feel like consumers should probably stay away from, and the kind of, I don't know, the infrastructure? Should you go back to coaxial cameras and CCTV? Like, this is a problem I've been thinking about a lot because a lot of people lean on those cloud-based solutions and stuff like that. So, and again, I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole of home surveillance, but if there's anything you could unpack there, I'd appreciate it.
It's not even a brand, it's to technology type. So there's two different types of cameras. There's the cloud-based proprietary thing where you connect it. It's easy. You get alerts on your phone automatically. You don't have to open ports in your router. You don't have to know what OnVIF is. You don't have to set up like different anything. It all just meshes together and is easy. I could give this to my grandma and she could set it up. And then there's, the OnVIF cameras where you have a camera and you give it a username and a password. It has an IP address. It has a port. You have to have a recorder. So you have to set up your recorder or your recorder software, which means you have to understand how to connect the two, which means that there is a friction point. And that's the problem, is that when you create a friction point, you've created a opening for somebody to remove that friction. And the way that they usually remove that friction is say, just plug this shit in and give us your name and we'll make it work for you with an easy app. But that means you're giving up control to them. And this reached a crescendo, I think, with you see that Ring camera
I did,
thing
the Super Bowl ad?
Yeah, the Ring doorbell. There was that during the Super Bowl where they're like, we can help you find your lost dog. It's like, well, how do you help find the lost dog? That means you can see everything that's going on everywhere. And I'm really happy that a lot of people got the point as to why that's a bad thing. It's the, wait a second, you can find anybody, anywhere, anytime using AI? Because they were really trying to pull at the heartstrings of people that have lost an animal. And I've lost an animal too, but I don't want to give up the Fourth Amendment in exchange for being able to find that animal as much as I miss Oreo. So it's the question of cameras that you can connect, that you set up yourself, versus cameras that you have them set up for you. And those solutions have existed for a long time. They still exist. It's not like MP3 players or the market to buy one that doesn't suck has been taken away. Thousands of companies sell cameras that you can just connect and hook up how you want. There's like, GeoVision, Dahua, Axis. I don't know if Hikvision is still allowed to with the Chinese ban on imports, but there's hundreds of thousands of companies that sell those, and they always have. It's just you have to hook it up yourself, which is annoying. And most people don't even want to be hanging cameras around their house to begin with. They're not doing it because it's fun. They're not doing it because it's like setting up a music player or downloading a movie. They're doing it because to prevent, or not to prevent, because it doesn't prevent. They're doing it to be able to catch somebody who broke into their house.
Yeah.
So to most people, security cameras are already a chore. And they don't want it to be made more a chore by, now I have to learn what OnVIF is. Now I have to learn how to use ZoneMinder or Blue Iris or Frigate. Frigate is what I use for my house. It's part of that 900-page guide. It uses AI in what I think is an ethical way to be able to track objects and see what they are. So it'll tell me, like, that is paper rolling across the floor. That is a dog. That is a person. That is a car. And it will send me alerts to my phone based on that. But in order to have it send me alerts to my phone, I have to set up mosquito broker and home assistant and a server. And like I didn't even know what mosquito broker was until I wanted to set up security alerts. It's a way that that Frigate communicates with Home Assistant. But the fact that Frigate has to communicate with Home Assistant to send an alert to my phone, like there's two different servers that have to be run. Just the fact that that exists, that's going to keep 99% of people from actually setting it up. Yeah. Even though I put together a guide on how to do it. And I don't blame them, because most people are trying to have a life. Most people work 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week to be able to keep up with inflation and the rising costs of everything over the past 5 years. And they don't have the time to figure out how any of this stuff works, even if I do put it in a guide.
Are there any solutions that are better than others? Say, again, just given those examples of where, on one end of the spectrum, Nest might be the worst, but what about, say, a Ubiquiti solution that has the hard drive, NVR kind of local server component to it? Are they any good?
I have not tried that. I wouldn't want to say they're good or they're bad just because I haven't tried it. I wouldn't want to crap on their solution one way or the other.
Yeah.
I don't know if they are. But what I've told the audience is anytime it requires connection to the manufacturer's server to work, just assume that someday it won't work. Because usually that is what happens. And even if they're the good guy today, they may not be the good guy tomorrow. And so many of the companies that were the good guy today, 6 months or 9 months or 12 months from now, are not. So what I would say, and rather I'd make a general rule, which is if Ubiquiti makes it easy, that's great. But if they're making it easy comes at the requirement for you to connect to their server, if it doesn't work without connecting to their server, then it won't. The best items are the ones that will make it easy for you or let you use all the cloud connected easy stuff, but also give you the option to do it locally. I'll give you one example with thermostat. So I use a Venstar thermostat. It is one of the worst touchscreens in the world, but like you have to smash the thing to get it to work. But I can use it with their system, but they also give me what's called a local API, which means I can connect it to my system. It does not have to connect to their system in order to work. When I look at that thermostat, the clock and the time is always wrong on it, which is beautiful because I blocked it from connecting to the internet, but it still connects to my Home Assistant server. So the systems that are the best are the ones that will give you a local API option in addition to being able to connect it to the cloud. And any of the systems that have that are the ones that I think are the best. The ones where if you are an expert, you can set it up and self-host your own and configure everything yourself. If you're not an expert, they have some sort of auto config wizard for you. And I don't know off the top of my head if Ubiquiti has that, but if they did, I would say that it's a good option.
Yeah, I mean, it's so overwhelming because there's so many data points. The digital litter at this point is just, it's overwhelming.
If I tell somebody to forward a port on their router in order to get their camera system to work, they're buying a Nest or a Ring doorbell. Like, I know that for a fact. Who wants to learn how to do that? That's 30 minutes to an hour of your life wasted going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, what device is my router? How do I log into it? I've logged in. What is the port I need to forward? Okay, now I need to configure alerts. Like, Nest and Ring just do that for you, and that's why they became popular. They remove friction from people's lives.
My concern is that with all these, in the past, things very much were analog. If you say you were an attacker, in so many ways, you would have to focus in on one person, or say a State Department and a team of people would focus in on one person in the collection of data and everything. And my concern is at scale, artificial intelligence systems, at just a basic fundamental level, the ability to index and parse or query information at scale, the rate at which we're able to do that is kind of unprecedented, where in the past it was a little bit more disconnected, right? And my concern is that there are going to be threats to the average person at scale that they just can't really comprehend right now. And it's like back in the days of the internet, if this is a good analogy or not, people trying to figure out, what the internet's going to look like. You can't understand what it means to have a Facebook in 1998 and what the implications of the attention economy are until you've already started going down that path of misaligned incentives. And so my concern is, with all this information out there, there's going to be threat vectors that people aren't even aware of. What are the proactive things that a person could or should be doing right now to maybe mitigate some of these things in all aspects of IoT, cars, and stuff? Like, what are the few things? It's like, this is an onion, you're going to have to peel back some layers. What are the first few things that you should start doing now?
Prevent it from becoming centralized as much as possible. So people will always push back and say, why do you against flock cameras and these other things? There's cameras everywhere anyway. And what they're missing is what you said, how easy it is for AI to be able to aggregate that information quickly. If somebody wants a camera from my store, they have to knock on the door. They have to figure out when the manager's there. They have to ask for it. The police would have to show a warrant, or at the very least, give me a good reason. If there's a bunch of blood outside the store and everybody said that somebody was getting their ass kicked outside, I may not wait for a warrant. I may just see the situation and go, here, you can see what was going on outside my store with the camera. But with Flock and systems like this, you could have 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 cameras that are all viewable from a central location, and then have AI go through all of them. And that's what creates what's called the dragnet, where you can see what's going on all the time. And when the Fourth Amendment was created, when this was framed, I mean, I don't even think that cars were a thing back then, much less the ability to see what was going on everywhere all the time. So pushing back against these things becoming centralized is very important. Having a security camera in every business is totally okay. I have security cameras in my house, and those use AI. But if you look at what CCTV stands for, the first C is closed. Closed circuit television, closed. It's not open to everybody who wants to view it within the city government. It's not, these 10,000 cameras are viewable by everybody. So keeping it from becoming accessed by one central authority is very important, because if you have that power plus AI, then you can just type in something like, I want to see where people who vote like this spend their time between 7 and 9 p.m. on Friday. And it'll accurately tell you that. There's a program I use called Image, IMMICH. It's a great open source alternative to Google Photos and iCloud. And in my opinion, it works better. The AI works on your computer. It doesn't connect to anything else. And I remember typing in man with cancer, and it actually found a friend of mine from high school that in the few recent years got cancer, and it found the photo of him like 2 months before he had his diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
And this is an open source AI that's running on a Celeron.
Do you think it was based off of conversations that you guys had that it attributed it to, or it was just the actual visual?
It didn't have access to conversations. It was just looking through the gallery app on my phone.
Oh, wow.
So I'm now, it could be a fluke. There are other images where it's given me very interesting diagnoses. It's been like, I've typed in weird stuff in there just for the hell of it, like avoidant ex-girlfriend. I've just put a bunch of random things in there just to see what it spits out. And it's surprising how much stuff it actually gets right. Now, when you have something, whatever they're using is eons above what's running on this garbage 2018 Celeron with 8 gigabytes of RAM in my closet that I'm using it as an image server. So if you have that and you give it access to tens of thousands of cameras, you really are at the point where you could just analyze what anybody is doing at any point in time. And that's incredibly creepy. And
it's unprecedented.
Yeah, stop it from becoming centralized.
Yeah. Are you familiar with, is Mirafish?
No.
It's an open source product on GitHub where essentially it's a predictive tool, like kind of Minority Report style, and being able to predict things. But my concern would be that as these systems become more centralized and there is an illusion of accuracy in some capacity, that people will lean on them more so than, be it military systems with a human in the loop for the kill chain versus, again, you see these systems that were originally used for ISR and military conflicts where they'd have like the drones or the aircraft that would loiter for extended periods of time and record. And if a terrorist put a IED next to a roadside and it detonated, they could go back and they could rewind where they came from based off of the continual surveillance, right? And now you have satellites that have, centimeter accuracy that are, it's maybe a 28-hour kind of ability to refresh. But in the future, when we have these constellations up and everything, what's the refresh going to be on that? Is it going to be minutes? Is it going to be just real time? Like, the concern in so many different areas when these things get deployed domestically. I don't know if you're familiar with Baltimore or not, but they actually took the same, I don't know if it's the same program, but the same methodology from that example that I gave you in the military scenario, and they deployed it in Baltimore where they did continual surveillance over the city. I think it was 2015, 2016 or somewhere around there. And they did find that when they tried that they were violating their Fourth Amendment right in that sense. So there is a little precedent that is pushing back, but my concern is with all this data information and the testimony here recently with the various generals and people in law enforcement, military, were like, hey, like, how are you accessing this information? And we're like, well, we are operating within the bounds of the Constitution. It's like, you didn't answer the question. They just keep saying we're operating within the bounds of the Constitution. It's like, okay, but how are you doing that? You're buying third-party data, and because everything's click wrapped, people are agreeing to these terms of service that are just like, we're going to share it with whoever or sell it to whoever because we're subsidizing it. We're giving you a cheaper or free product so that your information is the thing that we can sell and everything. My concern is that we're rapidly approaching these scenarios in which there's almost no turning back from. So what I'd like
for people to walk away from, or like what are the things that I can start doing today? If it's, turning off the things in my vehicle, if it is getting an MP3 player, if it's like buying this camera, or if it's showing up, like how do you introduce accountability, like voting for the same person who's saying they're coming in, they're going to introduce change. It's like every politician for the last 60, 70 years have said that they're the change politician, and yet the industrial complexes around misaligned incentives keep chugging forward in a way that I feel like they're extracting more value than they are providing to the consumers at this point. So like, how do we get this pendulum going back the other way? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a few things to unpack this. So the first is the most important thing that anybody can do: stop making fun of your neighbor or your friend or somebody else online when they get screwed, as if it's not going to happen to you the next day. Like, I think the thing that frustrates me the most is the example I gave before, where somebody will say like Tesla machine spy on you, or the computer will spy on you, or whatever, and they'll say you're an idiot, you should buy a Chevy like me, and then it's front page news in the New York Times that General Motors was selling data to LexisNexis and then insurance brokers. If you had said it pushed back against that practice, even when it was happening to somebody you may not have liked, who bought a car from a company you don't like, maybe it would have been harder for General Motors to be able to do that to you. People are always making fun of their neighbor when to get themselves to like, I bought the right brand car, I did the proper research because I'm smarter. They use it as an excuse to give themselves a dopamine kick, rather than say like, yeah, you're different than me and you bought something different than me that I wouldn't have bought, but yeah, that's bad that you got screwed. Let's try to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. Secondly, it is actually showing up to these things. It is when look into whether or not those types of cameras are being installed in your area, and don't think that sending an email
How do
or
you look
showing up.
into that?
We started a website, ALPR.watch, which actually scans every single city in the country with more than 50,000 people, and automatically grabs the parts from the legislature, automatically grabs the hearings, and then will email blast you if you put your email and your zip code into the site. So you can see where they're coming up. Or just go Google whatever your city or state is, your zip code, just Google city council for it. And honestly, just even use Gemini's free AI or ChatGPT's free plan and go like, yo, do they have flock cameras in my area? What I like is I use AI a lot, and people don't expect it because I'm against a lot of surveillance, but I like using it against itself. I mean, like, is this showing up in my area? Show me how to navigate this annoying website to find it. The third is when you were talking about Ring and what a lot of these companies are doing, and whether or not it's easier to have other solutions. We actually, at FULU Foundation, our nonprofit, one of the things that we have is a bounty program where we will pay people to break the digital locks in these products to come up with solutions. So one instance, when the Nest thermostat stopped working, we said, we'll give $10,000 to somebody if you make that thing work again. Because there's a law in the books right now, it's Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that says that if I break a digital lock, even if it's to fix something and I show you how to do it, I've trafficked a solution that can get you 3 to 5 years in federal prison. And we're trying to show just how ridiculous this is, as this law that came out that was supposed to be anti-piracy in the 90s is now being used to stop people from getting their exercise bike or their thermostat to work again. So for the Ring camera, we actually do have a bounty right now that's up to $14,000 or $18,000, where if somebody makes that Ring camera work without connecting to Amazon servers, we will pay you $18,000.
So, okay, I'm trying to unpack that there then. Is if it's illegal, how are you incentivizing that?
Well, we will tell people, if you make the solution public or you don't make it public, we will still pay. So if people make the solution public, like I didn't tell you how to make it public, right? I'm not telling you to do something illegal. So if we verify that it works, you technically have not broken the law. But I also can't tell people what to do either. So if somebody doesn't make it public, when I show up to a congressional representative's office, I can tell them, the opposition usually says Louis is making up all these problems. So I'll say, are you okay with me releasing this? If I show people how to make this exercise bike that you lock people out of unless they subscribe, work again, that you won't prosecute. And they'll have a blank stare. And when they have a blank stare, it's like, there, I won. Because it is a problem. Because if it wasn't a problem, you would have said something. And now, let's say they do release it. This goes back to what I said about real activism. You can't just tell people what to do and yell at them and say, this is an issue and here's why you should care. I have to figure out how to make people care. When somebody's grandma is bothering them saying, my Nest thermostat doesn't work anymore and you installed this, and they're annoyed, and then I figure out how to make it work again. Now I've got somebody who's subscribed to my cause. They're not going to just put up a Twitter hashtag or a bumper sticker but not care. They're not going to think I'm lecturing them in the Greta Thunberg, how dare you style. It's not lecturing somebody. I've actively made your life better in some way. So one way or the other, it's a win. If people don't release the solutions, I get to show Congress how stupid these laws are. If somebody does release a solution, I now have hundreds of thousands of people that no longer have a brick product that are happy. So it's part of our way of trying to push this stone up the hill to try and, at the very least, reform the laws in the books that cut against digital ownership that you have right now.
Is there any progress being made towards that legislatively in any way that like people could help out with? Like, is there something in the DMCA that you'd say, hey, like if we all kind of banded together, we got politicians on board with this, we could remove this section or no?
There is a section 1201. That's the one that says breaking a digital lock is against the law if you traffic that solution to other people. And we had one politician that was open to it who ghosted us after 3 months of wasting our time, which is no fun. And now we're trying to find new sponsors for it. So once this bill comes out that we'd like to propose that makes it legal to break a digital lock for the purpose of repair, then at that point we could use everybody emailing and blasting the Congress people and senators. It has been like trying to push something up a hill. And the problem that I've had over the past 10 years on all these issues is when you talk about right to repair, like I can't fix this in my tractor, or I can't fix this in my cell phone, or this thermostat became a subscription. And then you look at inflation, the Iran war, ICE, gun control versus gun rights and everything else, abortion. People just look at it. It always gets tabled, right? And even last August, we actually made some progress in getting some politicians together, and then Congress closed because they didn't want to vote on to release the Epstein files and everything else. And in my experience over the past 10 years is there's always some bigger issue that people focus on rather than this. So what I've been doing right now is just trying to keep this in the collective consumer consciousness. So when the moment comes that there is actual ability to focus on this, people say, yeah, that's an important issue. I care.
Yeah, there's something I've really been trying to focus my efforts on, and that's again, I feel like there's so much value being extracted from the American taxpayer in so many different ways, and everyone is just so frustrated with the political and judicial systems, and that there's zero accountability. And how do you introduce some type of accountability in that? I have some theories or some ideas that hopefully I can put together a more of a cohesive, concise way, but it's using the legal system and with candidates in some way, shape, or form. I'll probably elaborate on that later. But yeah, so if outside of that section, is there any other type of, I don't know, are there websites or there advocacy groups or anything like that you found that are really like champions of that people should, like, I don't know, do you have a newsletter or something like that like?
Yeah, we have a newsletter at FULU.org, and we also have consumerrights.wiki, which is the project that I started 1.5 years ago, which is we try to get people to catalog every instance of this occurring. So when General Motors is caught selling data to people, and then that directly affecting your insurance rates, that has an article. So when you go to Chevy site to buy a car, it will give you a warning. If you have our browser extension installed, the Consumer Rights Wiki browser extension, it will actually give you a warning with a link to an article. Here's what they did. This way, because most people don't know about this stuff, and I don't blame them. Who has the time to research all of this all day? I barely have the time to keep up with all of it. And if you go to the website of the Nest, it'll tell you that they disabled the old one without having an expiration date on it. If you go to Future Home's website, it'll tell you that when they bankrupted the company when they weren't making enough money, and then sent out a firmware update forcing people to pay $117 a year to get back access to their home automation systems. I want people to know this before they actually buy the product so they can make an informed decision. And this website is editable by anybody. Anybody can create an article, anybody can edit it, and we have staff members that are analyzing and looking through the rules and also the participation to make sure that things are going well.
And it's an extension for what browsers?
It works on Firefox, Chrome, Brave. It'll work on any of the modifications of it. So like if you use LibreWolf or if you use WaterFox.
Okay.
Yeah, any modification of Firefox or Chrome it'll work on.
Okay. Again, I'm always trying to think of like digestible kind of milestones too, outside of maybe just removing that section of the DMCA. In your mind, like, the pushback from a corporation would be like, yeah, we need, I don't know, a window of time on something, right? What would be a realistic, if you said, hey, look, okay, I get it. Maybe 5 years, 15 years, you could have a lock on maybe at a software level for equipment. But, from somebody like me, what clearly resonated when I saw your video on John Deere and everything, is like, realistically speaking, like at what point should that be like, I don't know, emissions, where it's like after 20 years, 15 years, it's considered a classic car, all bets are off, right?
It's funny, if you look at the actual emissions law, the emissions law says this explicitly should not ever be used to limit repair. I read the statutes that they're citing, and in those own statutes where because John Deere is always saying that if we make repairability tools available, people are just going to use them to bypass emissions. And the people that want to do that already. 1 block away from my house, there's a DPF delete guy. I'm not going to rat on him, but like he has a big sign, and it's been there for a while. But more importantly, people already do that. But the emissions laws on the books in the United States say you cannot use this as an excuse to limit repair, even by third parties. It's right there in writing, and it was there for a reason, because the people who wrote that knew that it would eventually be used as an excuse by somebody, and it was written into the law. And again, this comes down to an issue of caring. It's difficult to get people to understand what's going on and to care about it. But it's when I point this out to a politician, I can point out that somebody's breaking the law, but if they don't care about it, then nothing gets done. And that is
Yeah, that's frustrating.
There are laws in the books right now, and it's ironic that California was the one to pass this, because they will people that tend to be on the right will push back and say that they are more socialist in nature, but they actually enacted one of the best laws regarding property rights I've ever read. It says that if you are marketing a digital good and you say that you can buy it, purchase, own, sell, sold, if you use any of those words, but you have the right to take it away from somebody later, you cannot use those words anymore. You can't use those words because those words imply a transfer of ownership. And if you're using a word that implies a transfer of ownership, but you're not providing that transfer of ownership, you have broken the law. Now, the problem is I tried to have my users test this. Are you familiar with VitalSource? It's a college textbook company.
A little bit.
College textbooks have been a scam for so long, I'm pretty sure even we remember it, but it's become so much more of a scam now, where the teacher will get a kickback from the textbook company for making the people buy their textbook. You can get a license. You get 3 months, 1 year, lifetime. When you purchase lifetime, you know what you actually get? Up to 5 years unsupported, if it's on a supported device. The technology exists to give you a PDF file for over 20 years, or you're getting a perfectly rich textbook that's going to last forever, right? And you could read that on a Pentium 1 if you wanted to, but that's not what they choose to do. I had hundreds and hundreds of people contact the Attorney General, and they all got back a form letter saying, we can't help you, but if you want, you should hire a lawyer, which essentially is saying, fuck you, taxpayer. You're not paying us enough in tax revenue to actually enforce the law. Pay somebody else $400 an hour to give a shit. The problem with companies is that the ownership side has been so reasonable for so long and gotten trampled on for so long that I think that at some point there's going to be a pendulum shift back in the other direction. And while I am interested in finding a fair solution, I don't even think having something where you say a digital lock, you can criminalize breaking a digital lock on a product even for repair within a certain time period is okay. I think if you bought it, you owned it. And now I can buy a house from you that has all the doors locked, but the moment I buy it, I should be able to, if I want to have a locksmith go and unbrick those, I can do that. If I want to shoot the doors off of the house, I bought it. It's mine. I should be allowed to do that. I don't think there should be any limitation on that whatsoever. And I think that this is becoming a more mainstream opinion now than it was in the 90s.
For sure.
Because in the 90s, your refrigerator didn't come with subscriptions. I mean, you didn't have ads on your refrigerator.
Your mattress.
Your car didn't spy on you to your insurance company in 1997. So when a lot of these laws came out, we lived in a very different world than we do now.
Yeah, you brought up California, and that just reminded me. What about the implications on the KYC bill?
Are you talking about the 3D printing stuff?
Well, okay, there's that too. But I guess the KYC at a OS level.
Oh, you're talking about this is a big problem where it's called age verification. And I really don't like that word. I talked about this in a video yesterday, because when you hear age verification, it doesn't strike me as a real issue. Like when you first heard somebody tell you age verification is a serious thing, well, did it strike you as, oh my God, I need to care about this? Or did this strike you as, like, I show my ID when I show beer, why should I care?
Yeah.
Admittedly, it struck me as the latter. And I'm ashamed of it, because I'm the person who's supposed to be looking into this stuff, and even I didn't care at first. But it didn't strike me as a real issue, because you have to show ID to buy cigarettes, you have to show ID to buy beer, and do all these different things. But the reason this is a problem is their age verification to be able to make an account and use the operating system. Well, how do you verify somebody's age? By their ID. So now you have an authority. So now you're essentially saying that computers have to be made in a way where they're not going to work until you show your ID. That means that there's a centralized authority that's going to be viewing this information, which means that you've created the infrastructure to be able to decide who can and cannot use a personal computer. If I don't like your politics, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to use a computer. I mean, I've seen crazy shit out of both sides of the political aisle the past 6 years.
That's not even the proverbial but it is the slippery slope in that the phone, computer is such an integral part of the lived experience now, from, how you pay for things to how you travel. Like the ability to remove that from somebody's lived experience means that their life, you take everything away from them.
It's not even a slippery slope. In 2007, when the iPhone came out, that was the first mainstream computer that came out where you cannot install applications of your choice unless Tim Cook or Steve Jobs say you can. You can only install applications from them. Google started trying to do developer attestation or developer verification, where you would not be able to install applications unless the developer verified themselves and showed their ID and everything else. So now Google is trying to do that, and they faced massive pushback. You have many hardware manufacturers saying that we're debating whether or not we're even going to sell to the consumer market. We only want to sell RAM to AI companies and everything else. So we're getting to the point where maybe the whole concept of having a computer is starting to fade away. And then after that, you say, I have to show my ID in order to use a computer. It's not a slippery slope anymore. And I think that's the important thing to notice. If you look at the trend and you look at the pattern, personal computing has been becoming less free for a long period of time. And there's a very big reason that you should be angry at the idea that I need to show my ID to use a computer, because that is the first step to everything else. I mean, when they started putting up cameras everywhere, the whole point of putting up cameras everywhere was just to be able to catch people who went through red lights. That's all it was about. Like 5 or 10 years ago, we weren't talking about all this other stuff. And now they're being used by a cop to stalk their ex-wife across the state or the country. There was one cop that said, I was sleep deprived. I'm sorry, I had a mistaken judgment. What, so you took too little or too much Ambien and now you just have that exists.
Well, and that whole infrastructure now, my concern in so many ways is that, again, I like putting on the gray and black hats, and I like try to be it just go as dark as I can, as quick as possible, in some of these examples. And one thing that I think the average person doesn't even realize, the readily accessible information just to law enforcement and everyone. Like if you get stopped at a traffic stop or something along those lines, the officer is going to have access to your financial information, depending on the system that they're using, right? So like JP Morgan and or, Coinbase or whatever, you're able to see the value of that person that you're pulling over to. So what happens whenever you or a loved one travels to, maybe an area of the world that isn't as, safe as maybe the US or something like that, and they have cameras within the airport that have detection systems that are able to integrate in those systems and identify people of certain value that maybe they're able to extort in some way, shape, or form. Oh, you were speeding there, like I don't know if you've ever been to a foreign country and you've been pulled over and you kept cash in your pocket, but also cash in your wallet, so that they were separate, your passport and your ID. So it's like, oh, that's my wallet here, just take all the money that I have or whatever. But the ability to have so much intimate information in so many different ways is it's terrifying. It's completely concerning. And you're talking about that law enforcement officer. And again, I keep coming back to this. It's like, these aren't even hypotheticals. It's real world scenarios right now. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you push back on this in a meaningful way without like the programs like Mirrorfish or whatever they are that have some type of predictive component to them to identify that you're not in line with the typical or the, this political party or whatever it is. It's like, it seems overwhelming at this point. Like
this goes back to the acronym for cameras, CCTV. When people say you're being recorded everywhere you go anyway. Yeah, but that's this closed circuit television. My bank may be collecting all this information on what I buy and keeping it and analyzing what I buy, or the police may keep information on criminal acts that I've taken part in or not taken part in, or like this court may keep this information on me. It's not about any one of those individual points of data collection. It's when they can all get connected together to create a story on you.
Exactly.
And the worst is when, I think the part I forgot about before is when you said people were leaning too much on those systems in AI. With AI, 90% of the time, the reason that people do this is 90% of the time, AI will just produce something that is so much better than what I could have produced, and even 20 times the time. And that other 10% of the time, it acts like a drunk 16-year-old trying to drive. If it's like 9 times out of 10, it just produces this amazing result. It's really easy to just lean on it. I'm trying to remember the neurological term for it. My friend Jessa Jones is a PhD in molecular genetics, and her husband's a neurologist at a hospital. And she was talking about this with Tesla and autopilot. where they're telling people to pay attention. I understand holding people accountable and responsible for shitty driving. I'm all for that. But from a scientific point of view, when you turn on autopilot, your brain naturally...
There's a cognitive atrophy.
Yeah, like when you sat down on the chair, you probably felt the chair on your ass. And then an hour or two into a podcast, your brain is ignoring the sensation because it's no longer relevant. Like the feeling of my elbow on this chair was relevant when I put my arm down, but it's not an hour or two later. So when a system is so good at doing work regularly for you, it's not neurologically possible for most people to continue to pay attention and to continue to double check everything. Your brain just turns it off and considers this noise. This is useless information. I don't need to pay attention anymore. So if something is correct so many times, the facial recognition is just always on point. And then there's that one point that it's off. That police officer, like I always try to put myself in the shoes of the villain and assume that I would be the bad guy, not the good guy. So if this got it right 100 times in a row, and then the 101st time, it's somebody who's very wealthy, who hasn't stopped in this town, and I'm accusing them of stealing a $7 package from somebody that they don't even know, like their brain didn't stop to realize that this does like, I'm not saying that they couldn't have stolen it, but let me just stop and look at the freaking video to see if it even matches them first. Yeah. And it didn't, because the brain just threw it out because it wasn't useful information anymore. Like, I know there's a light there, but I stopped focusing on it in my peripheral vision when the light was turned on because I'm looking at you. It's not relevant. And if that light flickered a teeny tiny bit, I may not notice it. So a lot of police departments are relying on this because a lot of the times it really is correct. And if you have cold cases or cases that went poorly, and you have this thing that can connect billions of data points in seconds to figure out what you missed, of course you're going to use that. Yeah. If I was a policeman, I'd probably want to use that shit. If I have 87 cold cases and I know that there's a mother that is crying about her son who was murdered and everything else, and of course I'd want to connect to this thing that can do all that stuff. The urge would be irresistible. The problem is that the urge is irresistible, and then it starts but then when you get to that 10% where it gets things wrong, and that's aside from the whole ethical implication of are you even allowed to create that type of dragnet? The Fourth Amendment, unlawful search and seizure, they assume it doesn't apply to being in public, but there are actual court cases where this has been adjudicated.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
On Consumer Rights.wiki, I actually have a page that goes over this and the arguments that were raised by John Roberts and others in the Supreme Court, saying that if you create a system that is watching everybody all the time, that constitutes a dragnet. And when you've created a dragnet, you can't say that person just went out into the public sphere. Like
I think that's the same precedent that the Baltimore decision was, because they were recording the entire city for a sustained period of time or whatever.
Yeah, if you create a system that is a police officer is stuck with what he can search in a reasonable time period, and that is just very different from watching everybody all the time and then asking a computer to just look through and tell me the point that was specifically relevant. There's case law about this already. It already exists, and again, it just comes down to what happened in California when hundreds of people informed the Attorney General this company is breaking the law. Well, there's no private right of action, which means that he has to decide to get up off of his ass and tell the company that's breaking the law to stop doing it. In this case, even though there is case law, just because something is a law does not mean that it's going to be immediately followed or that you're not going to get in trouble if you break it.
Yeah. Man, I could talk for hours. I want to be respectful of your time. Louis, I really appreciate you coming out today. Is there anything else you'd want to cover?
Let's see. What have I missed? I went over our bounty program and the Consumer Rights Wiki, which are my two big projects right now. I want to get as many people as possible logging all these instances of companies doing this, because I do believe the time is going to shift when people start to care, or when we actually can get a law passed. And when we do, I want to have 30,000 pages I can drop at a senator's desk when they go, is this a problem? Here's all the times it's happened. And the only way I'm ever going to do that is if I have the help of other people to curate these articles, edit the sources, edit the things that we got wrong, add sources, add instances of companies doing this.
So what are all the instances that people could help out with as an example? What's something that they would contribute in that?
You buy something, you get an email from the company saying it's going to be shut down in 30 days if you don't pay a subscription fee. I'm sorry. Any instance of a company revoking your rights of ownership, in a systematic way, where it's not just a one-off customer service thing, but it's their policy. I want to know about all of them. And even if you don't have the ability to write a perfect article, even if you just write a basic little stub, it'll just get marked as a stub, and then a community of people will come together to find sources and make those articles better. I want a database of every time a company has either sold somebody's data, taken your data in an abusive way, or done something like this. So I want to have a resource that is community curated that just goes over all these instances, because there's no way for one individual editorial place or one person or one organization to cover all of them. It's impossible. And if we combine them all together, and then it's a database and we have this plugin, then anytime somebody is about to buy a product or use a service from one of these people, they know beforehand that they take part in that practice. And I think that'll help us be able to more generally inform people of what's going on. Because I have to get it to the point where enough people have the information to be able to get normal people to care and want to push back or poke or do something.
How can normal people help? Just subscribe to your channel? Like, can they donate to the organization? Like,
they can donate to the org financially. They can watch the channel. I'll be honest, the most helpful thing that they could do actually is literally just be open to editing the wiki and be open to learning more about those practices and be able to contribute whenever they see it in their own life. Like, the biggest thing that somebody can do is if they know somebody that is getting, what I used to say with repair is the best thing you could do is not even watch my channel or donate to me. But if you know somebody that had a product die and you know how to fix it, and the company doesn't want to fix it and they can't afford it, help show them how to do it. And then once they have saved that $1,800, once they get their stuff back, they're going to be sold on right to repair in a way they would never be sold if I just lectured them or asked them for money. It's like making those interpersonal connections rather than the how dare you brand of activism.
yeah,
I never want to be talking down to people or telling them what you have to do or what you should do. I want to try to get people to enjoying it. Like when you were this close to buying a product that would have screwed you and you didn't, and you feel that relief, that person is then going to be invested in what we're fighting for.
I feel like anybody who's gone through a situation where they were like, they run into that wall of like something that they thought that they owned and then it no longer functions for them. And then they feel like, oh, I'm out that money. And this thing, like I like your 8 sleep mattress or whatever wakes you up at 2:00 in the morning because it's max heat because it couldn't connect to Wi-Fi or whatever it is. I think it wakes a lot of people up. So
Literally.
quite
There's
literally.
no better way to get woke than when your mattress sets itself to 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And then you wake up because of an AWS server error.
Yeah. Okay.
There's also one item that I think Naomi Brockwell will be able to touch on a lot better than me because she knows more about it.
Cool.
That you touched on that I didn't as much, which is the government cannot collect certain data from you, but they're able to purchase that data from other people who have collected it through click-wrapper agreements. So this is a fun one. So AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon all got in trouble a few years ago for collecting people's data, location data, and then selling it. They sold it to bounty hunters, bail bondsmen,
Really?
advertisers. Can you imagine AT&T selling your data to a bail bond? You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Hey, this goes so far beyond any sort of Fourth Amendment thing. And they were fined something like $44 to $57 million. And this is a year they made billions. So the fine for what they did was 0.2 to 0.02% of the actual, of their profit.
Yeah.
So before they did any of this stuff that was wrong, that is I think that what the government did in fining them is actually a bad thing. I would have preferred they just never punished them. Because let's say you kill somebody and you didn't, it was a fluke thing, you didn't plan it. But let's say you killed somebody and you live in fear of, oh my God, what happens if I get caught? Now, let's say you actually get caught and they say there's $100 fine. You're like, wait a second. I killed somebody and the fine was $100? Wow, I'm just going to do that to the next person that annoys me.
Yeah.
So they did something that was horribly wrong. And they probably had some sort of like self-limit to their greed, like self-imposed limit on what their greed would be. And that self-imposed limit, if it was me and I got fined 0.02%, that's probably just going to go away. I'm not going to care anymore.
Yeah.
Now I feel like, wow, I could get away with anything. You feel emboldened. I'd almost feel a dopamine rush from getting that fine.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Naomi would be able to explore with you, because she knows more about this part of the law than I do, and she could inform you a lot, is the fact that the government being able to get data from private companies that have done this kind of click wrap thing to get around the Fourth Amendment, which is horrible because every company is doing this. Every company is collecting your data. Even if they're not supposed to, even if their privacy policy and end user license agreement literally says you can't fucking do this, when they do it, they get fined something so low that it's irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole rabbit hole of, again, I don't know how much I'm going to talk about this or even release, but one of the things I wanted to do was demonstrate the orchestration and kind of parsing of your digital footprint in kind of like a gray area. And so we're building this product called Opossum. So OPPO, like opposition research. And essentially what it would do is it would pull public and private information and create essentially a heat map in a way that almost like a localized chat bot, but visualization tools as well. So like where you're spending your time and all these other different things, scrubbing all your messages, because these things can live. And again, assume you keep up in the world of AI too, but like when you have things like Gemma and everything, just these very small, relatively small considering models that have the ability to live on devices, and you set we'll say escalation parameters as to things to be looking for, i.e. like the photos or whatever they are, like a specific contacts of like, you had cancer as one of your search parameters, but I would say that if I were a government agency wanting to push these things through, I'd say like it's to protect the children, right? We're looking for child pornography on devices or whatever those things are, and that's how you're able to have these products live on a device that would have these escalation parameters where maybe it's your Signal or WhatsApp encryption keys or whatever it is, having access to these things in a way that isn't gonna it's not gonna necessarily offload data like Pegasus would, but it would wait for the thing that it needs or whatever it is. It just, the implications are like so concerning for spear phishing, I guess, more so than just big blanket cast. It's if you're targeting somebody like a Bezos, Elon, or somebody, a government official or whatever. You care to talk about Clippy?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Like, how did Clippy come about?
The real story or the fake one?
It doesn't matter. Whatever. Because it's like, I feel like it's kind of taken over the internet now. Like I see Clippy avatars on any platform you go on. Like they're all over the place. Like how?
I hired somebody who was giving me tips and like just little advice every now and then on a lot of little things. And sometimes if I was really, really busy with something, it would just be the worst possible time. And I remember I said, stop clipping me. Because he was invited to be the office assistant. And then I thought, I was trying to do a video. And then I thought, wait a second. It's like, and then that's when it came up. It's like, why would I actually use that as an annoyance? Clippy didn't spy. I'm doing a video on surveillance or something. Clippy doesn't spy on you. He doesn't do any of these things. So I just wanted, that was supposed to be just a random throwaway video. It was just supposed to be just a random change your profile. I wasn't expecting that to get 4 or 8 million views. If I was, it may have been a slightly different video. But the idea was for normal people to just be open to doing what they can, where they can, to push back against something. So I've always thought that the legislative route for change, while I still pursue it, and I still will pursue it, is at its best a meme. And I've demonstrated over the last 10 years just how much and also how little you can get accomplished by doing that. You can have all these laws passed and some laws changed and nothing changed. And you can try to get people in trouble for breaking the law and nothing happens. The real change is going to show up when somebody says, you know what, I don't want to do that. When the engineers all quit, when you're supposed to push out the firmware update to take something that used to be something that the customer owned and turned into $117 a year, I'm not doing that. There has to be a stigma attached to that. Now, I don't know where that's going to be for every individual, but I think at some point in every individual's life, there's going to be some way that they can push back against this just a little bit. And if everybody did that all at the same time, maybe things would change. And I was trying to inspire some collective consciousness in people that you can make a change, you can make a difference rather than doing nothing. Maybe in some instances that would even be just not insulting your neighbor because they bought the wrong brand of something. Like you bought a Belkin thermostat, they bought a Google one. Oh, you should have been smart like being bought a Belkin. Like, don't do that. I was trying to just inspire some sort of collective consciousness in people to be able to realize that if they actually work together, they can get something done instead of shitting on each other. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's been very successful so far, but I do see that avatar show up everywhere. And it's interesting.
It's a movement.
Yeah. In the video, I see all these comments from people saying, like, this is just performative. Like, what do you think that's going to do? But at 5 minutes in that video, I said what I said here very clearly. At some point in your life, you're going to be that person that works at Apple that has the ability to email Intrasil. You're going to get asked, email Intrasil and tell them to make that a design that is proprietary only to us. Don't send the email. Just don't hit send. Just say, screw that. I'm not doing that. Like push back in all those little moments. And if everybody did that all the time, the world would be a little bit different.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting for, I'm going to push for legislative change, and I would like to see regulatory change, or I'd like to see companies at the very least be held accountable for what they do under the existing laws. But the real change is going to occur when people say, I'm not doing that. The person at AT&T that's supposed to give API access to the bail bondsman to somebody's data, say no. Say screw that. And if there's truly nobody behind you that would come up and do that job, then there really is not going to be a way for them to do that.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of ounces equal pounds. And so it's the little things that, like, I think a lot of people, again, it's a byproduct of social media and that that negativity bias, and where you're always consumed by the existential threat, the overwhelming thing that you're going to have zero ability to impact, that gets at the top of your feed. But if collectively people, and again, it's a very hard thing to do. It's easy to say, but if you focused on the few small things that you can control in your life, and everyone did that at scale, it just snowballs in a way that is the change that we really need. And I know it's very cliche, but I would hope that people take that from just being kind to, like, the random, like I got this thing where I'll occasionally get energy drinks sent to me, and my UPS guy is a big fan of energy drinks. So, like, just the small act of, like, giving him different energy drinks to try whenever he comes by, dude, his eyes light up, right? Super stoked, right? And I think about that, just random acts of kindness, the little things that you can do to have a meaningful impact in your family and your community. And if collectively, again, I understand it sounds so cliche and so like I don't know, it's just, but if we all had that mindset, just ounces equal pounds, and then just focus on the few ounces that I can contribute today, like collectively, I think we can chip away at a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and cleaning up your corner of the world a little bit. I want everybody to have that mindset of just cleaning up their corner of the world. I did a video on this with my grandpa. He lived in the South Bronx and he was broke for most of his life. He had to take care of my grandma that had a lot of health issues, and the healthcare system in the U.S. sucked as much then as it did now in many ways. So he never had a lot of money, and when he took time off of work, he had nothing to do and he would be bored. So he went around the South Bronx, which in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was absolutely destroyed. And he would just rebuild these random buildings. And there would be these kids that, instead of being on the street, would wind up spending time inside these buildings. And since they were inside instead of outside, even if they're smoking weed or drinking 40s as 15-year-olds, not the best thing to be doing, but they weren't out in the street robbing or shooting people. And it actually had a difference on his block. And I learned a lot from that. There's something you can do. And the kids started picking up hammers and picking up paint and actually wanted to do the things that he was doing, because they realized this guy is actually just making shit look less shitty in my neighborhood. And at some point, he was looking at them. He's like, why don't you, what are you doing, lazy ass? Pick up something and do it yourself too. Well, instead of getting shot, he wound up making a lot of friends in the neighborhood. And ironically, when there would actually be instances where there'd be some sort of violent gang crime or something in the neighborhood, he's walking through the wrong block at the wrong time, nothing would happen to him, because people would say, that's Mr. Jackie, cool. And I want to try to inspire that in people in here. And also a lack of that elitism. So this is one, do you have a robot vacuum?
Not plugged in.
Strange one, but
yeah.
So there's this one firmware, it's called Valley Tudo, and it stops your robot from connecting to the cloud, which is great, because a robot vacuum that connects to the cloud, that has a camera and a microphone. You see where this is going. Mm-hmm. So they make something great. And some of the best vacuums are called the Dream vacuums. And these require that you solder a board together and plug it in order to reprogram it to use this firmware so it doesn't connect to the cloud. So I'm looking into this because I'm very interested in it. And as somebody who's been soldering since 1996, like before some of my coworkers were born, I looked at this and I said, I do not have time to be fucking around with this and manufacturing PC boards. So I look up the person's GitHub account for the person who's making this. And he explicitly says, you cannot buy this board anywhere. If somebody is making them, they are scamming you. You should have to learn soldering. Not everything worth doing is going to be easy. Some things are just going to be hard. And while I understand that learning to solder is a great skill, fine. There are a lot of people out there that just want a vacuum cleaner that does not take pictures of them and upload it to a server in China, that may not know how to solder. And that's okay. Those people could be doctors, they could be lawyers, they could be mechanics, they could be people that know how to do a bunch of shit that I don't know how to do. And I'm just reading this and I'm thinking, like, this is that open source Linux elitism that winds up pushing people back to Windows, Mac OS X, a spying Nest doorbell camera, and everything else. And I wound up recording a video just reading this screed. And I understand the aggravation with people who will expect you to do everything for them, but to actually say out loud, if somebody helps you do this and bills you $15 or $20 just to make it easier for you to make your vacuum not spy on you, that's bad. They've scammed you. They've screwed you. He explicitly wrote the license for his projects that other people could not make that board and sell it, and he doesn't sell it. I find that to be a very unfortunate form of elite. Like, that's gatekeeping.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gatekeeping sometimes that occurs within the privacy community or people that care about this, to where, if I've learned how to do this, I'm special. You need to now go through all of this shit and learn it to get where I am. That keeps people from actually taking the actionable steps they can take to become more privacy conscious.
Yeah, you touched on. So I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole of all these different.
That's the Greta Thunberg shit.
Yeah.
So, the how dare you. That's going to make somebody say, sorry to cut you off, but that's going to make somebody say, well, fuck all you privacy people are insane. I'm going to do this. Like, why do you care about privacy?
Yeah. So the Roomba situation was kind of interesting. Doing a little research on it here recently, and going back to the Amazon acquisition that fell through. But when they announced that they were going to buy them for however much, and rightfully so, I think a lot of people were concerned that there was going to be this device in their house that Amazon was now going to have access to data to see and confirm the things that you purchased from Amazon, but also the position of them in the house, where they were going, and all these other different things. If those devices were talking to each other, be it Alexa and everything else, the implications for data sharing for one of these massive tech monopolies was concerning enough, to the point where enough people made enough noise where it didn't happen. So what happened? Roomba ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and it was absorbed by a Chinese company that now owns the floor plan for 40 million households. And that's just in some Chinese server somewhere. Now, again, it's one of those things where, people were concerned about what was about to happen. Now you have to be concerned about what did happen. It's like, where, what's the alternative to these things? Like you say, like maybe it is, you go down the rabbit hole of trying to make it so that your device can't phone back home. But again, it becomes one of those onions where there's so many layers to peel back, that I think it's easy for people to be so inundated with the sheer amount of things to do out there.
Why did I buy a robot vacuum? Because I got to a point in my day where I was so busy fixing up so many things that were going wrong with one of my companies that I did not have 25 minutes to vacuum at the end of the day and mop. So the cross section of people that are buying a robot vacuum because they don't have 25 minutes to mop, and also not having the time to do their own PCB board manufacturing. That is not a Venn diagram. That is a fucking circle. And the fact that the people that's what bothered me. I appreciate the hell out of the people that program that. Thank you. You've done a very good service by creating something that makes it easier for people to not be spied on. But like, if you're a part of that community and then you're just actively saying, if anybody tries to make this easier for you, like, I'm reading this, and what pissed me off is I know how to solder. I have a business where I've taught people like all around the world how to solder. I dig into and reverse engineer things all the time, which is exactly why when I get home and it's 1 a.m, I don't want to reverse engineer my robot vacuum. I just don't want it to watch me.
Yeah.
I don't want it to see, I don't want it to report back that I was watching reruns of Gilmore Girls or something embarrassing. Like, I don't want and that shouldn't be something where there's where there is that like level of elitism. And what you're saying, I think that happened with 23andMe too. The company like went bankrupt. So who gets all the genetic information that they have afterwards? And the answers that they gave Congress are horrible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is a lot of these companies, the average person has no idea who's buying them out of bankruptcy or whatever. Niantic is another good example with Pokemon Go. You familiar with that?
I'm not. I just know Pokemon Go, they had a lot of location data they collected on people, but
ton of location data. Now they're using the data for spatial confirmation around delivery robots and stuff like that, because it's way more accurate and real time, getting that confirmation from users who are constantly playing the game in certain areas versus relying on something, say, user reviews or Google Maps and Street View or something along those lines. So it's just, again, it's so easy for the average person to be so inundated with the ways in which they're creating a digital wake with their footprint that, where do I start peeling the onion back on this?
Yeah, that is a giant mess. And there are several robot vacuums that have already been hacked to where they are actually, like, people have, at least with DJI, they were able to see inside of other people's houses.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot of these devices are not very secure.
Yeah, well, you say DJI. That was another concern, is like all the drone information and everything being routed back. We have some of the robot dogs from Unitree, and it's just, you just don't know, like, all that information from LiDAR to cameras and everything else being routed back through servers, and in the guise of we need this for cloud compute or whatever it is. Where is that information going, and how is it going to be leveraged against me in the future?
There were people in the Texas state legislature that had concerns about this with flock cameras. Their concern was, if it's this easy to hack into, what if somebody from China hacks in and can figure out, here's the perfect point to choke everything because we know exactly what cars and what trucks are going along what way. If you could look up the license plates and then see which cars and which trucks are carrying what type of stuff and where they go, it makes it easier to plan some sort of either mass casualty event, or it makes it easier to plan something that closes a road that will then cause the most amount of strife in a particular area. Because breaking into flock cameras is fairly simple. They're running very, very old. Some of them are running very, very old, unpatched operating systems. And Ben Jordan has had a lot of fun and done a lot of good work breaking into all of these cameras and showing how easy it is to do.
Well, they also offer third-party camera support, though, too, right? So there's no check on how, like, current or new or what security measures outside of the stream is, right?
I'm not sure about the third-party support thing. I do know that most people just usually go with whatever the default is. I have a DPS is using a bunch of them.
Where do you see it going 5-10 years from now? Because again, I tried to get my mind in the, just a hypothetical, where's this path go? So rereading Animal Farm in 1984 and all these other different things. And, I see a lot of these kind of parallels in, like, the changing of the writing on the side of the barn, and then the sheep and the regurgitation of, like, these talking points and everything. And it's like, wow, it's so eerie to see how people can forget things from a few years ago, or how regulation now can be accepted, whereas 5 years ago it was like, that'd be unthinkable.
I think it's in an ideal world, people start noticing, pushing back against it, ownership becomes back to being a thing, and mass surveillance starts to go away. Realistically speaking, people just fight amongst each other amongst every other issue while this stuff all happens in the background, and it's too late. And I've even noticed that, like, on the surveillance side, a lot of the people making noise in Austin are left-leaning people, and when I show up to those protests, they're all saying, like, screw ICE, we don't like what ICE is doing. And some of the stuff that ICE does is stupid, I get it. But when you have a hyper right-wing legislature in the state, because they're unapproachable, like, a lot of people that's showing up, they won't say the word homeless person. They'll say this marginalizes and criminalizes unhoused folk. That person is never going to be the person that's asked to speak at the Texas state legislature, or ever get asked with their opinion from a politician there who actually wants to ban them. There are 3 Texas state senators that want to ban ALPRs statewide. They're actually interested in pushing forward a bill.
Really?
And, like, I asked, why are you talking to me instead of everybody else? Like, why not talk to the ACLU? I'm like, never mind. I look at their website and, okay, you guys are probably not going to get along. And there's actually a fair amount of overlap. And I think it's easy for me to make the case in some of these matters to a more conservative legislature. So how long have you been living here for?
Almost 10 years.
Okay. So, like, I lived in New York in 2020, and I remember in COVID, in April of 2020, Mayor de Blasio put out a tweet saying, if you see people that are not social distancing, meaning that they are less than 6 feet apart, take a picture and report it to this tip line. And the NYPD would show up get you in trouble for it. So Imagine what that would be like if you had flock cameras.
Oh yeah.
Or like Gretchen Whitmer, and during COVID, she was saying, you can go to aisle 11 in Walmart, but don't you dare go to aisle 10 because that has stuff that's not essential. Imagine if there was a camera to be able to enforce that in real time, who could tell exactly where you are and alert the police in real time and everything else. It's fairly easy for me to make these arguments to a more conservative legislator or a liberal legislator as to why this is a bad idea. But the issue that I see popping up is if you see every single time there's a protest against flock, it's a bunch of people say, like with the T-shirt that says no person is illegal, and that's in a right-wing state. Then you create that counterculture of people that are like, oh, that person doesn't like it. Well, I don't like that person, so yeah, yay surveillance. And this happens with somebody who is running in Long Island. I think he's running for governor. I forget his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. He's one of the city managers, or I forget the name of the politician. But he was saying that because Mamdani got elected, we're going to do the opposite of what he's doing because of all the socialism in New York. He's like, we're putting the license plate readers, the surveillance cameras, and all this other stuff on the border, and he's bragging about it. And it's like, A, that doesn't really solve or stop the crime, but B, you're owning the libs by installing a surveillance state stuff into your own neighborhood at taxpayer expense. Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff that I'm actually scared of seeing happen. I'm scared of seeing some sort of culture war to where conservative people see that the people who are protesting this a lot and are allowed right now are more liberal leaning, and then saying, okay, well, I don't like those people for this number of reasons, legit or not. Therefore, I'm going to do the opposite of that, and I'm going to support all this stuff in my own community. And that's why I've always tried to approach it from that Austin says they have no money, but they're spending $2 million to put AI cameras in parks. Like, what if they just taxed you less? Or what if they just use that to make the roads not suck? What if they use that to actually open the homeless shelter so that person is not yelling in the street screaming?
Yeah, optimize your budget.
Literally anything else but this. So I think that there's probably going to be some sort of counter culture war backlash that I don't really know how to deal with effectively.
Yeah, my concern, and like in the kind of progression of writing these books, was the first one is that your mind is really the sacred place, and it's being manipulated in so many different ways by your social, quote unquote, social experience, which is really like a digital lived experience in so many different ways, and how you can protect it in ways you're manipulated and stuff like that. The path I feel like we're going down with surveillance in so many different ways is the infrastructure of rails for a level of control that is completely unprecedented. And just to say unprecedented is in and of itself is almost a disservice to like just how scary it is, because to make it a partisan issue, at some point, you're not going to be in control, whether or not you're part of some type of ideological stance or a party or whatever it is. It's those people who are looking to extract value. And I know this is getting at a very high level, but at the point at which you have artificial intelligence companies that have scraped the known internet, used everybody's data to the point where it's exhausted, you get to the point where you're looking to extract whatever those raw materials are or whatever. You have humanoid robotics that are maybe able to displace workers and stuff like that. There is a potential for control in a way that has never existed in humanity, right? And my concern is that we are willingly giving up a lot of these data points and in lieu of like convenience and whatever that is, accessibility or whatever, and then just kind of like, well, it's just too much. It's, like, what do you have to hide? And I think it's opening the door for a level of control that just has never existed before. Like being able to identify threats and whatever that threat is to your control or your power or your P&L, whatever it is. It's just concerning. And I don't know what the solutions are. That's literally why I'm trying to have these conversations, is to say that I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that we need to be having these conversations. And if ounces equal pounds, what are the things that I can do to chip away at it so that my children don't grow up in this Orwellian nightmare?
I just keep saying, try to clean up your own corner of the world. Like when we schedules, we also have this Zulip group where people can join and they can talk about any of their own areas. It's segmented by city, and there's one person in Vidor, Texas, actually, that wants to run for city council against their city council person that voted in favor of these cameras when she saw the small margin that person won by. So I'm not saying everybody has to run for city council, But like, if when I show up with 100 people. That's different than when I show up by myself. If I showed up with 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 100,000 people, I imagine that people would act differently. And I've been very surprised. This is one story about that I want to tell. This is from 2015. This is what inspired me to actually get started with all this. I remember going to the state legislature with Jessa Jones and Gay Gordon Byrne, who runs repair.org, and I thought this was a total waste of my time. I showed up. I wasn't dressed well. I didn't even have a tie. And I'm talking to one of the state assembly people, and he said that the Apple rep said, when I replace a fuse in a motherboard or I replace a chip or I run a wire, I'm turning it into a PC, but I'm misrepresenting it as if it's still a Mac to my customer, which is fraud. That's why what Louis is talking about is wrong. I'm talking to somebody who's probably 77 years old, not really technically savvy. And I had to put down my anger for a moment and get my composure. I brought a prop with me. It was a motherboard that had a wire run across it that I could detach and reattach. When I plug it in, the fan spins. When I take the wire off, it doesn't turn on. And I said, can you explain to me how this is no longer a Mac because I put a wire there? If you change the brand of tires from Goodyear to Michelin on a Ford F-150, is it not a Ford? And he's ignoring me, and he's just writing on his desk. I'm like, I showed up. I didn't even care about lobbying anymore if I ruined their bill. I just said, I traveled 100 plus miles to be here, and you're not even listening to me. He's like, and he takes the piece of paper and turns it around and says, I'm co-sponsoring your bill, asshole. There you go. And it is like, why? And I said, well, nobody else came here to tell me otherwise. You're the first person to tell me otherwise. Now I know. You should show up more often. And he looked at me very seriously. He's like, you should show up more often. And he made a point. Everybody believes that this is pointless. Everybody believes you already lost. Nobody's going to listen to me. What's the point? I don't know anything. And maybe sometimes something does happen that causes people to believe that that's the case. And I think people this is very unpopular, but I think it's true. People want to believe that's the case. Because if you do work 10 hours a day and you go to school and you have relationships, you don't have the time to take a day off to go to your state legislator. You don't have the time to call them, to email. You don't even have the time to Google to figure out who they are, because when you get home, it's 1 a.m. and you got to go to sleep and wake up again at 7. So most people, I think, are looking for a reason to believe that there's no point to doing anything, because most people don't even have the time to do anything to begin with. But the reality is that the people who are pushing for this stuff, they have full time to do this, but they're outnumbered by people. But the thing is, they have the time to show up and be there every day. So to a legislator, they feel like they're getting the full story, and they feel like the full story doesn't include our side of it, because we're not always there. And oftentimes we're not there because we don't have the time for it. And a lot of the times I think people have this internal dialogue that convinces them that there's no point to trying. But when you actually try, something does get pushed forward. It's just, the thing is, we have to win every time. They only have to win once. Once those cameras go up, they're solar paneled, they're solar powered, they have LTE modems inside of them. They're good. Even though the city ended its contract with Flock Surveillance, something tells me that all those cameras along I-35 that the city's not paying for, Flock probably still has access to that data. Are they not still training their system based on what's in there? They only have to win once. We have to win every single time. And that sucks. And that gets people depressed and feeling like there's nothing I can do to move forward. But if you it's hard to flick people out of that. But if you do, you realize that, me showing up without a tie really did win out against an Apple and a Samsung lobbyist. Now, the bill didn't get passed, but I got one person to change their mind. What if I was there with a few 100,000 people? What if I was there with thousands of people or hundreds of people or anything other than just me?
Yeah, nothing gets me motivated like a good underdog story. And I feel like I never want to bet against humanity in that, like, especially, this day and age, people I feel like are very, well, I'll take that back, because the digital age, it's easy to get confused, and well informed is not necessarily the most accurate way of representing it. But I feel like people have the ability to organize at scale, if they can keep from being, caught up in the pettiness of, bipartisan politics or whatever. I feel like we're all on this rock hurling through space and time together. So it's like, to get as petty about things like that, about what color, sticker you're wearing or whatever pin you're wearing, I think that's just is a distraction to the point where we're starting to see some of the downstream consequences of that.
Yeah, I think most people would rather, regardless of who they voted for, if they got to see that $2 million get spent in their community, or for an AI camera inside of their favorite park. That's weird. LiveView's, the weird part about that company, their website was actually creepier than Flock's. It said that they believe people behave differently when under surveillance, so that's why they make their cameras large. They believe that for a long period of time, people had cameras like that, and they put them in the corner because they're inconspicuous. But that's the wrong theory. The right theory is to make the camera look as disgusting and as as invading as possible, so that people's behavior changes when they know they're under surveillance. You spend $2 million to put that in a family park.
Yeah.
I don't. Whoever somebody voted for, if you got to see that $2 million actually get spent on making your community suck less in any way possible, even if it's a way you didn't agree with, it's going to be better than giving it to that company to suck up your data and use it to train their models.
Yeah, there's absolute truth in that statement. Unfortunately, it's not as what they intended. Like you say that like you could put up a shell camera and it have the same effect deterring as an actual camera, be it outside of your house or something along those lines. But there's a lot of truth in that. The act of observing or recording someone changes and alters their behavior. My concern is that at a societal level, when people know that somebody is quote unquote watching at all times through their phone, their TVs, and every aspect of their life, it's like, then, there's a term, and I forget which book it was, but it's the right to sanctuary is just being completely attacked right now, where there is no space in which you can just freely experiment with what it means to be a human. I have an idea that I don't have fully fleshed out. I don't understand my argument, so I want to bounce it off of you. I could be completely out of context. It could be wrong. It could be stupid. It could be offensive or whatever, but I need to have that bounce back and forth with somebody to test it, stress it, or whatever it is. There's no room for play when you're constantly being observed, because you're always at risk of being canceled or whatever it is. And that's super concerning.
I was using a recording studio as a business office, and I traded my services fixing things in exchange for me being able to use it to see clients. And there was this one person who took over the studio, who had no idea how to run a studio. He was just running in my opinion, a drug business, and using that as a front for it. This is back in like 2009, 2010. And he called me and he asked me to replace all the studio monitors with these PA speakers in all the studio rooms. I'm just thinking, nobody's going to want to pay for that. This is a bad idea. And I get off the phone. My phone is water damaged because I'm cleaning my bathtub, and I'm complaining to my girlfriend at the time about this. Like, this guy's just selling cocaine or something out of here. He doesn't know how to run a studio. This is ridiculous. Like, I'm not doing any of this shit. This is stupid. He doesn't know what he's doing. Now, apparently I was still on the line because I didn't hit end. I didn't hit the end of the call because my hands were wet. And he calls back and they were very aggravated. But this, I explained my thoughts and everything. It's like, they said, it's very weird, but you didn't apologize. Like, well, I would never apologize for what I say in private. I shouldn't have to ever apologize for what I said in private. You were not supposed to hear that conversation. It sucks that you heard it like that way. I would have explained it to you differently in person than I did when I was aggravated and speaking to my girlfriend, but I'm not going to apologize for what I said in private. When you have a conversation with your girlfriend, your wife, your brother, your kids, they know who you are. So there's certain prerequisites where you don't have to say all this stuff like as a prerequisite, because they know who you are. Like, they know that you're not an axe murderer. They know that you're not like a psycho racist that hates everybody that doesn't look like you, whatever else. So when you're saying something, there's like, you don't have to explain all this other shit away. And when so you're going to phrase things differently in private than you will in public, because in the public, you're talking to people who have no idea who you are. So if those communications get leaked, then you get seen in this different light because you would have spoken differently. Like, that's why I don't apologize for what I say in private, because it wasn't meant for you anyway. And the problem is people are going to talk very differently if they feel like they're being watched all the time. And you're not supposed to be watched all the time.
Yeah. Again, I go back to kind of the implications for the youth too. Can fortunately romanticize a time in which, I knew that the internet was a little bit more of a difficult thing to access, be it dial up and going to a community center or something like that, not having it in the house, and being able to go out and be a kid. And you say stupid stuff, you do stupid things, you get hurt or whatever, you go through a breakup, and now there's evidence of that, and there's starting to be research come out around memories and how the natural process of being able to let go of something, and younger kids just don't have the ability to do that because everything's documented. Again, one of the analogies I like to give people is like, you go to a shooting range and you're putting dope on a scope at 100 yards, right? and say you're off just the slightest bit, maybe half an inch, right? Not a big deal whenever you're at 100 yards. But as you get to 500, 1,000, you start getting so far off target that it's not even close. And I feel like we're starting to see those downstream effects of these I don't know, technological issues in life. And I think the observation thing, or at least the ability to not have that sanctuary, that spot where you can just be a kid and not have things documented. You can do stupid stuff. Again, you can go through a breakup and not have that online that your future spouse sees 15 years later or something like that. It's just like,
Did you see the park video from Ben Jordan? He was when he managed to hack into all these cameras, the part that fucked him up the most is when he's looking at a guy that we found a swing in a park that was swinging in the wind, and he looked around like this to see if he was being watched, and then got on the swing. Because, a 40 or 50-year-old guy going to a park that looks like it's meant for kids, it's probably going to be seen a little weird. So he's making sure, he's just doing what many of us, I just want to share a moment. I want to enjoy the swing. I want to feel like a kid again. He looked around. Nobody was watching. There was nobody there. He got in the swing. But he didn't realize there was a flock camera watching him. And then that guy was published to the entire internet. And like millions of people saw. And that's just weird that when you're literally in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, and you're looking around to see if you could just enjoy a moment swinging on a swing the way I did. Last time I did that was 30 years ago, and he was being watched by a camera that anybody could hack into because of the poor security.
yeah, that hits on a different level. It really does. I feel like if that happened to just any random, and of course there's the websites that you can access, not just flock cameras. Like I am familiar with a lot of Ben's work and just the security vulnerabilities around flock cameras. But I mean, there's unsecured IP cameras you just access via any of these IP cam websites, right? And it's just the average person doesn't even realize those things exist. And I hope, if anything comes from this whole process, these conversations and stuff, at least one, people get informed in a way they're able to make some type of educated, proactive plan, and whatever that is.
It's cool to see people that are engineers that understand this to some extent in government. There was one person in the Texas state legislature that actually used Linux who got kicked out recently. I think it was an abortion or either an abortion scandal or like a cheating combined with abortion scandal. I forget his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. There's other people at the federal level. I know Thomas Massey is. He's the type of person that just builds all his own stuff from scratch. He's like one of those people that would experiment with Arduino. So having a conversation with him would be infinitely easier than having a conversation with a legislator that actually believed the Apple story of changing a MacBook into a PC and misrepresenting it to people. It would be great if normal people who were aggravated at this type of surveillance actually emailed them. If all of them actually emailed their state representatives, there is willpower in the Texas state legislature to ban this stuff at the state level. They just need to see that enough people support it. And right now, all the people supporting it locally are the people who are like, fuck eyes, highly lefty thing. But I do think that there are a large cohort of people that are more right-leaning that also don't want to have their tax dollars spent to be watched everywhere they go. And they just need to hear that.
Yeah, I agree. I would put a call to action here if there are any like tech savvy vibe coders or something like that. I feel like there's a need for, like Coinbase did a really, really good job around the last two elections and being able to activate the user base by giving them access to their representatives in a very frictionless way. Like you would log in and then they would give you a essentially one-click process to get to creating an email to go to your representative, state, federal. I feel like something that would be really, really good for your consumer rights wiki website would be something that, like, again, you'd have to figure out the privacy thing, or it could be a completely different website where it's just like, okay, we have this issue, or this legislation is being introduced, or this thing's happening. You just go here, boom, and it lists all the people that you could just auto draft. It doesn't matter if you're using ChatGPT or Claude to write a letter or whatever, but just letting them know so that you start that communication chain. And in the event something happens, like where you do have an Austin City Council meeting, you have the documentation of where you did email them, and then you can bring that stuff and show up in person and everything else. Because the more I think we start reaching out to these people, again, I'm gonna have to. I've gone through the stress testing with some FEC attorneys over the last couple of years, and really trying to drill down a way that we can legally hold representatives accountable in some capacity for the way that they campaign.
What's your goal with that? Tell me more about that.
My goal, well, let me tell you my concern. My concern is that that social media has led to the polarization in a way that existed in society, but it's amplifying it in a way, exacerbating it in a way that's ultimately going to lead to some violent situation that, you know, these instances like the Charlie Kirk or Ferguson, where you may have a political or ideological perspective that aligns with that movement or whatever. These are all going to be powder in this powder keg, right? It may be a spark that ignites it, but I think ultimately we are financially in a situation as far as our debt is concerned, unemployment potentially rising if the economy takes a turn down. I just feel like all the ingredients are getting to the point where there is potential for violence in society in a way that's unprecedented, at least for the last few generations, domestically. And my objective is to avoid that at all costs. Like, I'm doing a disservice to my children, my family, and everyone else if I have the ability to make meaningful progress in averting that in every way, shape, or form that I can. And I think that by just joining in with the echo chambers, I'm only contributing to it. I think there's I think social media incentivizes people to pull the fire alarm. It doesn't incentivize people to come up with proactive solutions to stop the fire from happening, right? So like, everybody will tell you that social media is bad for you, that the economy is going to the shitter, all these things. It's like, okay, great. We all know that we're going towards the iceberg. How do we divert the path that we're on? And I think that one of the few ways that we could probably do it is if we have some way to hold politicians accountable. Because right now, the objective for most politicians is raising money. How do you raise money? Campaign dinners and these other different things. And then you have lobbyists, and, you know, you are familiar with the process. And it's like the average person is so defeated, and like, I keep voting for change, but change doesn't happen. The only thing that changes is our debt, or my inability to pay my bills, or the quality of my life is going down. The crap that is in my life lasts half as long as it did before. You know, it's like the degradation of the human experience, or the American experience, and whatever that is. So it's like, how do we add teeth to holding our politicians accountable without violence? And I feel like we live in a very litigious society. And some of the ways I was exploring it was maybe a super PAC that could hold politicians accountable through putting their stuff in a blind trust or something. But stress testing that with FEC attorneys, there's a massive conflict there. But one of the ways we're looking at right now is essentially like a bail bond, right? So you can enter into a legal agreement that a person can put a bond up for, and if they violate the terms of that agreement, then those assets are forfeited, right?
That's your idea.
Well, there's a number of different ways, right?
That's a good way.
Right.
Like
And
it.
so one of the things I was, again, this is me just throwing shit out there. I'm sure there's way smarter people out there, but I want to be one of those guys contributing proactive solutions. So I would say, you know, we come up with a term for it where it's like certified accountability politician, right? So it's no cap, no vote, or something like that, right? And if a politician's willing to put literally their money where their mouth is, I will disclose my assets are worth $5 million. I will put up half of my assets, $2.5 million, where they will be liquidated in the event that I vote for anything that violates this. And like, I would encourage people not to go as granular as like a 20-page document, but let's say, hey, if I am a single issue voter, let's put together a pool of all of our money, and whatever that is. A group of people donate, $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, or whatever it gets up to, and we will back this politician, whatever that is. But if they go against us, then they entered into that bond agreement where it will liquidate their assets and whatever they offer up. And I think that if we get a few politicians that are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and say, hey, look, I will not vote to infringe on, or if legislation gets put before, I will vote yes on this, or whatever it is, clearly define those rails. And I think if we kind of collectively came together, and again, you're not going to be able to change the world. You got to pick a few layers of the onion, and I don't think that they're going to be, you're not going to be able to do ideological. Maybe you can. Maybe it becomes a movement where it's like every single special interest is like, hey, you got to enter into this agreement or whatever. But at least at that point, there will be teeth in holding politicians accountable. Again, using the legal system against versus violence. And I think that we are rapidly approaching that violent component because people are so frustrated with their inability to be able to make rent, so frustrated with just being screwed over in every way, shape, or form by their politicians. It's like, that we talk about, again, I don't want to make this political, but I think it's important to have that context where, people are looking at like, maybe boomers or whatever, where Medicare, Medicaid going bankrupt, insolvent in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's like, okay, but we're able to spend how much money in defense budget that doesn't get audited, and like, I don't understand why we're at war. Like you try, and again, I try to have conversations with people. It's like, okay, I understand you're passionate about this conflict happening over here or whatever. Pick your war over the last 60 years. We don't have a good track record in hindsight of one, spending money, or winning hearts and minds, or whatever these things are. It's like, at what point does the average person just say, hey, look, we need to focus on us? Like, and it starts with me, right? And I'm not going to pass the buck on the they, them kind of the ambiguous government person or thing that I have no control over. It's going to start with me. I need to have a positive impact on my community, and it starts with how I behave around, the people I have an influence on in my community. I'm like, one of the, let's make this about me. One of the things that the stories I have in my first book that really kind of like, it's hard not to get emotional about, was like, I started doing these kind of meditations, prayers, or whatever before certain instances of just gratitude, being thankful in the moment about certain things. Again, a lot of religions have this practice before meals, before they go to bed and stuff like that. And I tried to introduce it in a way that was inconvenient to me. So before I get in my truck, I sit and I say, just for a few minutes, man, I am grateful I have reliable transportation. I have fuel. I have a job that allows me to be able to purchase fuel and get to go where I'm going. I get to go here. I don't have to do these things, right? And then this shift started happening in my perspective whenever I was getting stuck in traffic. We get on 35 and we realize it's a parking lot and things like that. And then I start looking, like, my perspective started shifting. It was like, oh, I'm not just sitting here in traffic whining about woe is me, I'm going to be late. This thing is happening to me. The world revolves around me, 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 me. It was like, oh, this dude is working on the side of the road here. He has a job. He's probably got a family at home he's providing for. He is making my community better. He's changing the infrastructure. It's like, it's a perspective shift in my life that I found that by just focusing on the things that I do have control in, hopefully those ounces equal pounds. And I keep going back to that. And so I'm trying to be as constructive with my criticism about those bigger 50,000 foot view things like politics and stuff like that, but not forgetting the things that I can have a meaningful impact on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard, but and I know it's a shotgun blast in answering your original question, but there's small things that I'm trying to focus on by improving myself and my community, but also how do we attack this existential thing in a way that doesn't lead to violence. And I'm open to criticism. Like if people have constructive solutions, I welcome them, but I don't want to hear things like, well, it's all going to go to shit. And like, this sucks. And it's like, well, okay, just be constructive.
So what are the ideas you've been working on so far, and how far have you gotten with any of them? What stage of the planning are you in?
Well, so it's funny. I kind of bounce these off of the trust agreement thing for about a year as I was doing different podcasts with the first book, and I was gonna formally say, hey, look, I'll put $1 million to back if other people donate up to $1 million. I'll match that, right? Because I really believe that if there's certain ways that we can create a financial incentive, be it with a PAC or something along those lines, that will definitely show politicians that, hey, look, we're serious about this. And very few, like, let's make this as single issue as much as possible. Like, what are these things? And again, I hired law firms, and again, I wanted as many different legal opinions on it. And ultimately, it felt like that wouldn't, if you put their assets into a trust, then it could be construed that you have control over them then, and that wouldn't pass muster as far as FEC compliance is concerned. But by entering into a bail agreement, a bond in that sense, there seems to be really good precedent there and being able to hold people accountable in their actions. And so I'm trying to formalize that with a few different law firms, and then just put it on the radar as many people as possible, let them figure out what the issues that are important to, and if I can get behind it as well, be it privacy, right to repair or whatever. And we target those politicians that may be on board with it, say like a Massey or someone like that. Cool, awesome. If you're running, you have a primary where special interest is trying to, and we can inject that money into their campaign if they're willing to enter into a bond or something like that. Again, I want to make sure that we have full legal clearance to do so, and then the FEC wouldn't have any issue with it.
What are the biggest things they've had the issue with, the FEC? You said it was part of it is if you say that I can revoke this bond, then technically you would have some sort of control over them.
Correct.
It's interesting because that technically would be more control than having the carrot of I will donate to you again next time if you do what I want, because that's an implication of control, whereas this is an actual written contract of control. So by trying to get around politicians being controlled by special interests, you actually wind up becoming a written version of it. But in this way, I think it's at least honest.
Yeah, it's transparent, right? And I think that's the issue with society in so many different ways, is that a lot of these political things are done in closed doors or behind closed doors, and the voter or the consumer gets given an explanation or something that may be disingenuous. Like, is it like data in and of itself is one of those things that really frustrates me. And like when people will give you skewed data sets just to get your I don't know, your vote or whatever it is, or to get your emotions going, and then they go and they pivot and whatever that is. Again, it's easy to get people motivated or upset at some point. It's very hard to follow through. Like, how many people are I don't know, backing up campaign websites and stuff like that? What are the clear things that people campaign on, saying what their positions are and like how do they go against it?
That stuff gets erased usually very quickly. I've
Very
noticed
quickly.
that. I tried with the campaign against right to repair in Massachusetts in 2020. There was a ballot initiative on whether or not the independent mechanic should get access to the same things that the dealers do, or telematics or fixing cars. And they made the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data. It was funded by General Motors, Nissan, Toyota, Honda, and Ford. And they were making these commercials that said that if this gets released, that you're going to get sexually assaulted in a parking lot. They said it supports racism, redlining. It's literally just says give the independent mechanics access to the tools needed to diagnose what's wrong with the car. That's it. And you can't find any of this on archive.org. It is gone. It literally,
Really?
the websites were taken down the day after the vote was done and they lost. The only way that any of this is archived is in a YouTube screenshot from when I was visiting the website, and it wasn't a high resolution one because I figured you could just go to the website. I didn't think to archive high resolution. So it was a small browser window I was showing on screen. And so every time I have to reread what they wrote, I literally have to go to that old YouTube video and do the CSI, like the enhance, and squint and try to, and like that's my evidence, and it's horrible. But yeah, you're right. They usually do that stuff does get erased. Usually forget about once they broke their promises. That stuff is erased the moment the election is done. Usually.
Oh, for sure. Or even leading up to it, and that's the frustrating.
What would you have to change in order for that to not be an FEC violation? Or how far are you into figuring out how do I modify my approach so that this is this?
Yeah.
election?
So the first one was the trust, which was arguably the thing that the FEC would have issue with, but a bond they wouldn't. So because the bond is entered into by them willingly, and they're accepting the criteria. Whereas the trust, you're doing it through the terms of an operating agreement, and operating agreements can be changed.
Okay, so that makes sense. So let's say I get the funding for my campaign, it's done. If I do something against this, I would now have to make up for that from my personal finances, not from my campaign finances.
Correct.
And what's the barrier to that getting done here? Or is it just you're still just working along?
That's what we're going through right now.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So and honestly, that's why I'm having these conversations with people, is like trying to figure out. Again, one, I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room. So by having these conversations, hopefully smarter people may have better paths or ways to optimize my thoughts or logic. And my hope is that I don't think, because we're already through the primaries in a lot of ways for this year. I don't see a lot of that happening anytime this term, but next go around, I think that hopefully we can have enough money raised for different, representatives in state and federal seats, that it will at least push the needle in some areas where it will cause some meaningful change, right? Because we have between FISA and everything else that people just continuously just keep getting railroaded on. Was it 15, 20 years ago with SOPA and PIPA? The entire internet just gets up in an uproar. And then, all these things that just happened the last few years where, it's just like nobody cares.
They did something very interesting and risky. I think they either got a bunch of large websites to put a notice in the front of their page, or they just made it so the site stopped working for a while.
Yeah.
And said this site won't work until you contact your representative.
Wow.
And again, that's the thing. A lot of what got rid of SOPA and PIPA many years ago is getting all those people to work together.
Yeah.
And I would be open to that. I mean, I would be open to shutting down my site to say, yeah, contact your politician about age verification.
Yeah, I would love to, again, reduce as much friction as possible, because again, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to have like a third party integration where it's just like I can, use the whatever government website API
for Senate, it's super easy. For congressional district, there's APIs out there that exist for finding your congressperson based on your zip code, but some of them are accurate, some of them are not so accurate, some of them cost a bunch of money. So to making the thing that has the form in it already, here's what you say, the one who figures out exactly what your congressional representative is somewhat of a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
you're using somebody else's service for that if you want it to work well, I found. But reducing friction to being able to contact people is something that's important important if you want to get people to actually contact the legislator.
Yeah.
And even when you do make that, and I have made those forms, when I see the ratio of viewers to the ratio of people that used it, like sometimes it just makes me sad.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Or like 800,000 views in this video and 1,050 people use the form. It's like, cub.
And I think that if I think a lot of people are defeated though too. They feel like, well, this isn't going to do anything, and that's why I really want to offer up something that has teeth, because I think more people will get motivated. Because if they feel like, oh yeah, I will reach out to this person, I want that person to get elected, and because there's probably going to be a portion of the population that would be excited to see that person's stuff get liquidated if they did vote.
That would be, just for the fun of it. I
Yeah.
mean, forget about the actual issue we're caring about it. Just watching the news headline, it makes a story. And once it makes a story that people can, I don't mean a story like that individual news headline. I mean a story that people can follow that keeps them interested.
Yes.
Because the story is what keeps people interested.
Exactly.
And like with the right to repair stuff, I always knew with certain things back in 2017 and 2018, I have no chance of winning this. I'm just going to put a camera in the room and watch people say that, watch people's reactions to someone saying that a magtrometer on a microwave will explode. And like then they're part of the story of, all those legislators watched her just make up a part that doesn't exist and then say the thing that doesn't exist is going to explode. And then they feel invested in the story and it makes it exciting. And then it actually gets them interested enough to actually contact and reach out and show up. So if you're in the stage right now of figuring out how to word all these things so that it doesn't break any FEC guidelines, how long do you think that would take to be done, and how long until you have this wouldn't be ready for like the November election, but you would think maybe 2028 elections cycles, you could start, would you want to start going to candidates and say, this is of interest to you? Like, how do you start that?
I think the way I'd probably approach it would be, hey, I will pay for all the legal kind of structuring and reach out to some people like yourself that may be in line with my perspectives on things like right to repair or privacy, and be like, hey, what is something you're extremely passionate about? Like, what are your concerns? Where do you see these things going and stuff like that? Cool. And then I could work with some different organizations that know what seats might be able to be gotten far as House or Senate. And maybe even on state levels and stuff like that, because again, like you say, the Texas AG has been pretty good the last few years, far as some instances in consumer rights and privacy and everything. So if there's ways we can identify meaningful progress, and then again, just find people with audiences that could kind of carry the flag and whatever that is, right? So okay, well, Massey might be a bad example because he he seems like he's going to pass with flying colors, but there may be seats that are contestable. And I think a lot of these issues should be apolitical. They shouldn't be partisan. I think we should be able to say, hey, look, this movement is going to tip the balance in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't matter what badge they're wearing, long as they enter in this agreement saying we are a single party issue PAC or whatever it is, and we will help push this candidate through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I remember the best endorsement I ever heard of Thomas Massey is I got invited to this party that was just maybe 5 or 7 steps above my social strata. And there was somebody who is even infinitely more wealthy than the person that eventually helped me with funding FULU and my other endeavors, that was complaining really loudly about the fact that he was told by all the people he was working with, even if he wanted to donate a lot to Massey, that he wouldn't have a conversation with him. Like, forget about voting his way, he just wouldn't even talk to him. And that was one of the, like, hearing somebody who's worth multiple billions of dollars complaining that he couldn't purchase a politician was, that was one of the best endorsements of a politician that I've ever had in my life. And that's what actually made me, this was years ago, that's what actually made me look through his voting record and what he stands for and his history and become interested in any of what he did. Because I still remember that moment. I'm not going to say who it was but I genuinely, that was a very fun conversation. Just listening to him complain, like, damn, I can't buy you. It's like,
you know what got me down the Massey rabbit hole, which is funny, was I was just curious as to what he did with his chickens and his cows while he was in DC. And so like what actually got me into learning more about him was like his farm and how he was setting up automations and everything like that while he was gone so that his neighbors could help check in and everything. And then of course that, led to other different things. And
Yeah, it's hard to find somebody who's like politically minded, in his 50s, actually understands Arduino kind of stuff and will set up his own sensors and all that. Like that's a very, very interesting, and who's also not buyable. That's a very, very eccentric, eclectic mix that's just not going to come along for a long time again.
yeah. Yeah.
There's one thing that was earlier, since we were talking about so many things I never got out, which was when you were talking about all of this data collection subsidizing some of the cost of things. When you buy, I think there were years where Vizio made like 4 to 5 times as much money off of the data collection than they did off the televisions. However, they sell cheap shit. When you look at an LG G3 OLED, I bought this TV for about $3,800, full price. It's one of their flagships in 2023, and the option is still there to like do not sell my personal data was turned off by default.
Really?
So there's this argument that, well, if you wanted that, you should just pay more money. But even when you actually do pay for the flagship, the data collection is still there. And I don't think General Motors, when they were doing this, was making a distinction between whether you were purchasing a used Chevy Malibu or a Cadillac CT5e Blackwing. I just think that, like, that lawsuit never mentioned that this was only happening on cheaper models. A lot of this stuff where they will collect your data, it's indiscriminate as to whether you were a paying customer of an expensive product or a lower cost product. And the thing that bothers me when people will talk about how modern cars are made and how there are certain features that are subscriptions and how they'll nickel and dime you, or like BMW tried to make the heated seats a subscription years ago and that went very badly for them.
Yeah.
What they'll say is, well, if let's say it cost them $600 to put it in the car piecemeal, but it cost them $50 if they put it in every car. And then it's cheaper for them overall. And then they're able to offer the seats only to the people who really need it. And if a certain number of people need it, it's technically cheaper overall for production. But when does that ever happen to you? Like, I want somebody to point out when the BMW 330i was $3,000 cheaper this year for all the same functionality because of the data collection or because of features being turned into subscriptions. I don't see where this is becoming cheaper for consumers in modern times. I know back in 2004 when Yahoo Mail was offering you garbage storage and Gmail said, here, we have robots reading through and putting ads in the email, but we give you a gigabyte of storage and 25 megabyte attachments. Like, that was one of the grand bargains back when you actually did give up a little privacy and you got some cool shit for free on top of it. But now it just feels like you are giving up your privacy and you're not getting something in return for it. I don't see cars getting cheaper in the past few years. I don't see General Motors saying that the Cadillacs are going to start $5,000 cheaper because we're taking all your data. They're taking your data and selling it and using it in these ways, but they're not giving you a better product or a cheaper product as a result of it anymore.
Yeah. I think that, there's a lot there because you look at certain industries like, okay, we'll just say Google and your YouTube, Google Maps experience, like all these different data points their argument would be give you a better experience, right? More relevant, targeted destinations, content, advertising, whatever. But when you look at ACR on, like you say, Vizio, who in 2022 surpassed their hardware sales with their software, be it subscriptions or data collection, and then in 23 or 24 were acquired by Walmart. There's clearly something else going on here, right? The bigger corporations have the ability to get so much more intimate information about how to serve you, but I would argue also manipulate. Because if we've seen anything in the realm of social and digital, and again, people will argue that, by not paying for it, you are the product and everything, but it's really your behavior that is the product, right? Your watch time on video, watch time on platform. And then when your behavior is the product, not you, that behavior is at risk of manipulation. And when you look at that at a societal level, that's where the concerns for me come in. And I'm like, again, as I want to bring people into this world and have children. Like, I don't want them to grow up in a world where everything is competing to manipulate them and extract value. And so my goal in these endeavors that I go down, be it with books or content and everything that I make, is how do I offset and mitigate these things, and how do I course correct this ship that's clearly going towards an iceberg of control in so many different ways. And again, I keep saying it's the onion, but there's so many different layers to peel back that we have to focus on those little things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. And, maybe at some point people will get to disabling the GPS and all that other shit in their cars. But again, it's a constant thing. As Jack Carr would say, the enemy is always evolving, the battlefield, and everything else. It's a constant evolution. And so at the point at which, people may become savvy enough to disconnect their telematics control unit in their vehicle, maybe they make it where it's an integral part in the operation, where, like, Kia, the services that get discontinued or whatever it is, and it's like you get these bills that end up getting passed where it's like, okay, the remote disabling or kill switches on vehicles, that's like, okay, you're constantly having to adapt. But I think that we've leaned on people as a species, right? Be it, this is getting very high level, but we've always leaned on people once we started, agriculture and like specialists like blacksmithing and everything else. Like, you let somebody specialize in this thing and become the guy in your community that you lean on to do it, and you focus on your thing. We all contribute collectively as this thing, and we move forward. The unfortunate thing is that we started leaning on people for knowledge, and, politics and everything else. And these perverse kind of incentive structures have started deviating them from working for the greater collective good to extracting, profit or resources or whatever it is. And so my goal is that we, at least shore up. I tell people I'm an individual rights absolutist in so many different ways, because at the end of the day, if the individual, dies by the sword on their own, terms, then so be it. But the tragedy would be is if they didn't have the choice in the matter. And so, again, I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I like to have conversations with people who are way more in the weeds than I in so many different areas. And hopefully through these conversations, we can come up with constructive, meaningful ways in which people can at least chip away at and peeling back that onion.
Sounds like you're making progress.
Yeah, we'll see.
One foot at a time.
Louis, I really appreciate it, man.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.